I learned early that the forest doesn't forgive arrogance. I was 28, freshly sworn in as a ranger, convinced that knowledge of trails, maps, and survival techniques would shield me from anything the woods could throw at me. I had grown up near the outskirts of the Appalachian wilds, where trees towered like ancient sentinels and the wind whispered secrets to those who would listen. But nothing, not the countless hikes, not the endless nights listening to owls call across misted ridges, prepared me for the weight of what I would witness. When I first walked into the Black Hollow National Forest, I thought I understood fear. I thought it was something neat and definable. The sudden rustle of leaves, a rattlesnake coiled by a trail, the way your flashlight barely reaches the shadows. But fear here was slow, patient, and manipulative. It crept in under your skin, stretched into your thoughts, and waited. And it did not need to announce itself with noise. The first incident I remember clearly happened during my second week on the job. I had been assigned to survey a section of old-growth forest that had long been considered uncharted because its ridges shifted subtly with each season. The maps never lined up. Every year, the trails would bend in a different direction, as though the land itself refused to be contained by ink and paper. I hiked the familiar path, trusting the topography, the compass, my instincts. The air smelled damp and sharp with decaying pine. Something about it was off. There was a stillness that gnawed at the edges of my confidence. I saw the first sign before I understood what it meant, a series of footprints, larger than a man's, but with a strange elongation to the toes, almost claw-like, circling my camp in the soft mud. I froze, heart hammering, convincing myself it had to be a bear. But bears don't move in circles around a campsite, and they don't leave prints with deliberate spacing as if sizing you up. I dismissed it, nervously laughing to myself, telling my younger colleagues later that it was probably just some hunter with big boots. Deep down, I knew I was lying. The next night, I was on patrol along the ridge near Hemlock Creek. The wind was low, whispering through the canopy like the forest itself had breath. I heard a knock. Not at my cabin, not at my door, but somewhere deep in the trees, a hollow, deliberate knock, soft but insistent. I froze, flashlight slicing through the darkness. Nothing. Silence, except for the wind, or what I thought was the wind. I called out. Nothing. But then I heard it again, this time 3 knocks, followed by a low, guttural growl that vibrated through my chest. It was neither bear nor coyote, at least not any animal I had ever studied. My fingers clenched around my radio, trying to broadcast a call to base, but my voice cracked. By the 3rd week, I began keeping a notebook. I sketched the trails, marked the oddities, the strange sounds, the sightings. Each night, I would review my notes, trying to reason my experiences into the kind of reality that would satisfy any rational mind. But the forest resisted. Paths I had mapped in the morning no longer existed in the evening. A ridge I had marked as clear suddenly bore the impression of a cave entrance I was certain had not been there before. At night, my compass spun for minutes at a time before locking onto a direction that made no sense. Even the moss on trees, which I had learned to read as an instinctual guide to north, seemed to shift. And then there was the shadow. I first noticed it in the corner of my vision, low among the ferns, just beyond the edge of the flashlight's beam. I would blink, look directly, and see nothing. But the movement never stopped. It was massive, tall, covered in dark fur that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Every time I thought I had a clear view, it would vanish, leaving behind only the sense of being watched, the snap of twigs that no human foot could reach so quietly. My rational mind told me it was a bear, perhaps an unusually large one, but the footprints didn't match, the height didn't match, and the intelligence in its movements, almost human in deliberation, shattered every assumption I had. One evening, I found myself following it. I don't know why I did. Some combination of duty and sheer dumb courage propelled me deeper into the woods. It led me to a place that did not exist on any map, a hollow carved into the earth, wide enough for a man to stand, yet deep and dark, a maw into something older than the forest itself. The air was different there, heavier, damp, and metallic, like the scent of blood mixed with wet stone. My instincts screamed to turn back, but something tethered me forward. I dared a step inside and felt the floor shift beneath me, subtly, as though the hollow were breathing. I have often wondered if what I saw next was real or a product of exhaustion and isolation. From the darkness emerged a figure, taller than any man, with eyes glinting faintly like shards of amber in the dark. It watched me, unmoving, unmoved. I realized then that the stories whispered by old rangers, tales of creatures that roamed the oldest forests, part myth, part warning, were not just stories. They were records of survival, encoded in fear. I froze. The rational part of me demanded explanation. The primal part of me knew that explanation would be insufficient. And in that instant, the creature vanished, leaving only the echo of its presence and the soft, shifting air that seemed to tell me the forest itself had closed ranks behind me. After that night, my patrols became a delicate dance between fear and duty. I learned to read the signs. A snapped branch, the rustle of leaves in unnatural rhythm, footprints that appeared and disappeared overnight. I kept my encounters secret, documenting them only in coded notes and sketches, afraid that to speak aloud would brand me insane. Colleagues noticed my restlessness, the way I flinched at every sound, and I smiled politely, saying, "The forest plays tricks on you when you're tired." But I was never more awake in my life. Every sense, every instinct, every fragment of memory was tuned to the forest, and the forest was always testing me. One late autumn morning, I ventured to a ridge that I had mapped countless times. The fog lay thick, rolling over the trees like a living blanket. My GPS read a path that did not exist. I should have stopped, returned, called for guidance, but the shadow appeared again, just at the periphery of my vision. It seemed almost to beckon me, and a part of me, foolish, stubborn, human, followed. I descended into a small valley, and there, half buried under fallen leaves, I discovered a cave entrance that had never been recorded. The opening was dark, wide, and beckoning. The air was sharp, metallic, and smelled of damp stone. I paused, hand on my flashlight, heart pounding with both dread and the strange exhilaration of forbidden knowledge. As I stepped closer, the ground seemed to shift subtly, like the earth itself was testing my resolve. I heard the sound of rocks falling in the distance, though no wind stirred, and then, unmistakably, a low growl, human in rhythm, animal in tone, echoed from deep within the cave. My training screamed at me to retreat, but my curiosity anchored me in place. The shadow emerged again, massive and deliberate, as if ensuring I understood the rules. Trespass into these places uninvited, and the forest will notice. I watched, transfixed as it receded, leaving me with the cave, the silence, and a sense of awe that burned through fear like fire through dry leaves. I left the cave without entering, but I never forgot it. Over the following months, my patrols became a careful negotiation with unseen forces. Trails shifted, maps lied, shadows moved in ways no human observer could understand. I learned to track not just animals, but presence, subtle disturbances in soil, the pattern of moss on bark, the peculiar resonance of air in hollow spaces. I understood that the forest was alive in a way most humans never perceive, and that to survive one must respect it, fear it, and always remain aware of the trail that moves each time it is mapped. I will never forget the day I followed the creature deeper than I had ever gone into a canyon that appeared overnight in my GPS and maps alike. The cliffs rose like ancient walls, echoing every sound, amplifying my heartbeat, my breaths. I felt the forest watching, pressing against me. A fog descended, thick and unnatural, clinging to my clothes and hair. And then, at the center of the canyon, I saw it. A cave larger than any I had seen, its mouth like a yawning gate, the air vibrating with a hum that was almost a voice. I stood frozen, understanding at last that the forest does not reveal its secrets lightly. The shadow appeared once more, immense, terrifying, and strangely familiar, as if it had been watching my journey from the beginning. I realized then that fear was not the forest's weapon, it was the forest's language. Each step, each observation, each brush with the unknown was a lesson in humility, in awareness, in reverence. I could not conquer it, could not map it fully, could not name it, but I could learn from it, and perhaps that was the closest any ranger ever comes to understanding the wilderness itself. The days after the canyon encounter were the hardest. I returned to my cabin each night feeling hollow, as though part of me had been left behind in that cave mouth, swallowed by shadows that were neither animal nor human. Sleep was a distant luxury. Every rustle in the tree line, every crack of a branch underfoot made my muscles tighten and my stomach twist. I began carrying my binoculars at all times, scanning ridges, valleys, and hollows for any sign of movement. And always, in the corner of my vision, there it was, the shadow, impossibly massive, yet avoiding direct confrontation, an observer rather than a predator. One evening, I was patrolling near the creek that wound through the center of my district. The water glinted silver in the fading light, and the smell of wet earth filled my nose. I had been following a set of tracks that I thought might lead me to a trespassing hiker back when I realized the prints were not human. They were elongated, clawed, deep in the soft mud, and they twisted in patterns no animal I had ever studied would make. I remembered the hollow circle near my first campsite and felt a cold prickle along my spine. Someone, or something, was watching me, testing me, and I had no way to understand the rules of engagement. I followed the tracks into a dense copse of fir trees. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of decay and stone. The forest seemed to press closer, its shadows curling around me like fingers. I tried to rationalize, to anchor myself in the reality of what I knew. Maybe it was a bear, maybe a hunter playing tricks. But rationality dissolved as the sounds began. Low, guttural noises, neither human nor animal, vibrating through the ground, through my chest, through my bones. Then a series of knocks, deliberate and patterned, like a code I could not decipher. I called into my radio, my voice shaking, and received only static in reply. The valley's echo swallowed my words, mocking me. And then, as the fog thickened, I saw it, this time clearly, its amber eyes catching the last of the daylight. Its movements were fluid, deliberate, aware. Every step it took seemed to bend the forest to its will, and every branch it passed tilted, creaked, or snapped without wind. I froze, but some part of me, the same part that had walked toward the cave, pushed forward, compelled by curiosity I could not suppress. I followed it until it led me to a place no map could mark, a hollow carved from the base of a massive cliff, narrow and steep, almost vertical, as if the earth itself had been peeled back to reveal some secret layer beneath. The creature paused at the entrance, watching me, almost inviting me in. The air here was different, colder, smelling of wet stone and a metallic tang that reminded me of blood. I knew stepping inside could be the last decision I ever made. Yet I felt drawn, not by recklessness, but by the strange certainty that this encounter was part of my path, a lesson in the forest's incomprehensible language. Inside, the walls seemed to shift in the flashlight beam. One moment, the cave looked narrow and claustrophobic. The next, it expanded impossibly, as if the architecture obeyed no logic. I moved forward, every step measured, every breath audible in the stillness. I imagined the shadow following me, but I did not hear it. I only felt it, a presence that wrapped around me, intimate and oppressive. Then the growl came again, low, rumbling, reverberating through the rock and through my chest. I realized in that instant that the fear I had carried all these weeks was not an external force. It had been inside me, waiting for a shape, waiting for recognition. I spent hours mapping the interior of that cave, taking careful notes of stalactites, water streams, and air currents, but nothing corresponded to the dimensions I measured outside. I could feel the forest's patience pressing against me, testing my limits. Exhaustion gnawed at my consciousness, but I could not stop. I could not retreat into ignorance. I realized then that every misstep, every moment of doubt, had prepared me for this exact confrontation. The forest demanded respect, humility, and a clarity of mind I had only begun to achieve. Eventually, I turned back. The creature did not follow. It did not need to. Its presence lingered in the weight of the air, the subtle vibrations in the rock, the sense that the land itself had shifted in acknowledgement of my passage. I returned to my cabin, drained but alive, carrying with me a new understanding. The forest does not bend to human perception. Trails shift, caves appear where none existed before, but shadows move in deliberate patterns, and creatures may watch without intent to harm. Survival is not about conquering the unknown. It is about learning from it, about seeing clearly through fear, about letting your instincts guide you when reason falters. Weeks passed, and my patrols continued. The shadow appeared at intervals, always at the edge of perception, always observing, never striking. I learned to move through the forest not as a conqueror, but as a student. I noted the way the fog collected in low valleys, the way certain moss grew on rocks near hidden hollows, the way sounds bounced through ridges in ways that defied simple explanation. Each encounter sharpened my senses and deepened my respect for the forest's intelligence. Then came the night when the trail truly moved beneath me. I had been mapping a ridge I knew well, a corridor I had hiked dozens of times. The GPS read a path that did not exist. Trees I remembered clearly had shifted positions, and the earth beneath my feet felt subtly unstable, almost alive. I caught sight of the shadow again, this time moving ahead of me with deliberate guidance. My rational mind screamed retreat, but my instinct whispered that this was the ultimate test, to follow without fear, without hesitation, without expectation. I descended into a hollow I had never seen. The fog thickened until it felt like I was walking through a cloud, each step muffled, each sound swallowed. The creature appeared beside me, not threatening, but present, a silent companion guiding me deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the forest. I realized then that this was not an enemy. This was a teacher, a guardian, a reminder that the forest's rules are different from human rules. Respect them, and you are granted passage. Ignore them, and you are consumed. Hours passed, though I cannot say how many. The shadows deepened, and the cave I had glimpsed weeks earlier revealed itself again, this time as if the land had reshaped overnight to present a singular lesson. The air was thick, the metallic scent more pronounced, the silence deeper than I had ever known. And then, in a moment that will remain with me always, the shadow paused at the mouth of the cave and turned its eyes toward me. I understood without thought that I had been tested, that I had passed not by courage alone, but by awareness, by humility, by attentiveness to every whisper of the forest. I exited the hollow as the first light of dawn touched the ridges. The forest seemed to sigh, as though acknowledging my understanding. The trails I had mapped now aligned in ways they had not before. The paths became clear, and for the first time, I felt the strange equilibrium of fear transformed into comprehension. I knew I had been changed irrevocably. No map, no GPS, no rational mind could fully contain the wilderness. But if I moved with respect, with awareness, with humility, I could walk among its mysteries without being lost. Since that night, I patrol the Black Hollow National Forest differently. I listen more than I speak. I observe more than I act. I have learned that fear is not weakness. It is information, a tool, a guide through the shadows that humans often refuse to see. The shadow has not returned in full form, but I feel it in the brush, in the rustle of leaves, in the patterns of mist that gather where no logical wind could reach. It is a presence I acknowledge, a guardian of the forest's deepest truths. And in that acknowledgement, I have found clarity, a rare and humbling gift from a wilderness that refuses to be tamed. The nights grew longer as winter edged closer, and with the lengthening darkness, the forest's voice became more insistent. I patrolled alone more often now, preferring solitude over company. My colleagues noticed my growing obsession with mapping, my meticulous notes, and the way I spoke of shifting trails as though they were living entities. I smiled politely when they asked questions, but I did not share the truth. That the forest was alive in ways they could not perceive, that it whispered in codes of shadow and movement, and that I had glimpsed something older than any human story, something that watched with patience and intelligence. One night, I found myself retracing the path to the canyon, the place where the shadow had first guided me toward that vast cave. The wind was high, cold, carrying with it the tang of frost and damp stone. My flashlight illuminated the ground, revealing prints that merged human and beast, clawed and elongated, some half erased by the wind, others startlingly fresh. My pulse quickened, not from fear alone, but from recognition. The creature had returned, leaving traces of its passage as if inviting me deeper into its domain. I followed the prints into a narrow ravine I had never traversed. The trees leaned inward, their trunks bowed like supplicants, their branches whispering against each other in the wind. Each step I took made the ground beneath me feel alive, the soil shifting subtly, the air vibrating with low hums that resonated through my chest. My compass spun, erratic, refusing to settle. I knew instinctively that logic was useless here. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It was an active participant, a force that responded to intent, emotion, and perception. Then I heard it, a deep, resonant growl, unlike anything I had ever encountered. It was close, yet it seemed to echo from every direction at once. My flashlight beam caught the shadow at the edge of my vision, towering, massive, yet impossibly fluid in its movements. I froze. Every rational part of me screamed to retreat, to call for backup, to run. But another part, the part that had been honed by weeks of observation and fear, kept me rooted. I watched, heart pounding, as the shadow moved silently through the trees, leading me along a path that shifted as I walked it, folding and twisting in impossible directions. The trail led me to a hidden valley, shrouded in thick fog that muffled sound and distorted perception. I could barely see my own hands in front of me. The forest pressed in, its weight palpable, the scent of wet stone and decay more intense here than anywhere else. And then, at the heart of the valley, I saw it, the cave, its mouth yawning like the entrance to a world older than memory. The shadow paused at the entrance, watching me, and I understood. It was waiting for me to make a choice. To enter was to confront the unknown fully. To turn back was to retreat into partial understanding. I stepped forward. The cave's interior was vast, far larger than any human measurement could justify. Stalactites hung like jagged teeth, and the air was thick, carrying the metallic tang of mineral and something else, something alive. My flashlight beam danced across walls that seemed to pulse subtly, as if the rock itself breathed. The shadow followed, silent, patient, a sentinel of the forest's deepest secrets. I felt a fear unlike any before, a primal terror that seeped into my bones. But intertwined with it was awe, a recognition that I was witnessing something that defied reason, something the forest had kept hidden from human eyes for centuries. Hours passed, though I could not measure them. I explored the cave cautiously, mapping as I went, noting the unusual formations, the strange patterns etched into stone that resembled markings from some long-lost language. My flashlight flickered intermittently, and with each flicker, the shadows seemed to shift, taking on forms that were both human and inhuman. I caught glimpses of movement in the darkness, shapes that vanished when looked at directly, leaving only the sense of immense intelligence behind. The shadow did not intervene. It observed, teaching me, guiding me, and silently demanding that I pay attention to every detail, every subtle cue. At one point, I stumbled upon a narrow passage leading deeper into the cave. The walls were slick with moisture, the floor uneven, and the air thick with a suffocating weight. I hesitated, knowing that this was the threshold, the place where fear would confront understanding. And then I heard a whisper, or perhaps a vibration in the air, almost indistinguishable from the cave itself. It was a sound that bypassed the ears and settled directly in the mind, a subtle communication that told me, "You are not alone. You never have been." I pressed forward, each step measured, deliberate, aware of the presence that accompanied me. The shadow moved alongside, not touching, not threatening, but undeniably there. It guided me to a chamber deep within the cave where the air shimmered with a faint, unnatural light. The walls here were carved with deep grooves, ancient and deliberate, as if something or someone had etched the forest's history into the stone itself. I ran my hand along the grooves, feeling the vibrations beneath my fingertips, sensing the energy that lingered, a memory of events that predated human presence. The realization struck me with a force I could scarcely comprehend. The forest, the shadow, the cave. They were all part of a system far older and wiser than any human mind. Fear had been my companion, my teacher, my guide. It was not a sign of weakness, but a signal, a way to attune myself to the rhythms of a world that did not conform to rational laws. I understood that my role as a ranger was not to dominate, to conquer, or to map the forest with precision alone. It was to listen, to observe, and to carry the lessons of the unseen into the realm of the human. I emerged from the cave as dawn broke over the ridges. The forest seemed to exhale, the fog lifting slightly, revealing the trails that had shifted overnight. The prints of the shadow were gone, but the memory of its presence lingered, etched into my mind and body. I realized then that the forest had chosen to reveal only fragments of its secrets, enough to teach humility, awareness, and respect. And in that moment, I felt a connection to the land deeper than I had ever experienced. A recognition that the wilderness is both teacher and adversary, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Weeks turned into months, and my patrols continued with a heightened sense of vigilance. I no longer sought to conquer or dominate the forest, but to understand its rhythms, its patterns, its shifting trails. I learned to read subtle signs, the way moss tilted on rocks, the faint indentation of soil where the shadow had passed, the sound of leaves and unnatural sequences that hinted at unseen presence. Every encounter, every observation was a lesson in patience, humility, and the delicate balance between fear and comprehension. I began documenting my experiences meticulously, though cautiously. My journals contained sketches of the trails, notes on shifting landmarks, and detailed accounts of encounters with the shadow and other phenomena. I wrote not to prove their existence, but to preserve the lessons I had learned. That fear can be a guide, that the forest is alive in ways that defy reason, and that understanding requires both humility and courage. I knew that sharing these accounts publicly would invite skepticism, ridicule, or disbelief. Yet the act of recording them was a personal covenant, a promise to honor the intelligence and mystery of the wilderness I had sworn to protect. Winter settled fully over the forest. Snow dusted the ridges and blanketed the valleys, muting sound and altering the rhythm of the trails. The forest's voice had changed. No longer was it the whispering rustle of leaves or the subtle cracking of twigs beneath unseen feet. Now it was a low, constant hum, vibrating through the air, the trees, the snow, until I felt it in my chest, in the soles of my boots, in the back of my skull. The shadow had not appeared in days, yet its presence was undeniable, an echo that threaded through every patrol, every corner of the land I thought I knew. One night, I was sent to investigate reports of hikers missing along the ridge I had come to know as the Whispering Spine. The air was frigid, each breath crystallizing instantly before it left my lips. I trudged through deep snow, following tracks that led to nowhere, fading abruptly, as if the hikers had simply vanished. My flashlight caught branches bending, frost shaking from limbs without wind, and shadows stretching impossibly across the landscape. Every instinct screamed that something unnatural was at work here, that the forest itself had claimed its due and left a riddle in its wake. I followed a faint path that led to a small hollow. The tracks resumed here, but they were strange, part human, part something else. A single print appeared ahead, then another, shifting as if the trail itself were alive. My compass spun wildly, and the GPS showed multiple paths overlaying one another, none of which existed on any map I carried. The sensation of being watched grew, a pressure at the back of my neck and the nape of my spine. And then I heard it. A knock. Soft but deliberate, echoing against the trees and snow, a rhythm that suggested intelligence, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. I called out, my voice brittle in the cold, but only silence answered. The snow absorbed my words, but I felt the vibration of footsteps, not mine, crunching faintly through powder. I turned slowly, heart hammering, and glimpsed the shadow again, towering and silent, its amber eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. It moved with a deliberation that seemed to bend the forest around it. I realized in that moment that it had been guiding me here, shaping my path, testing not just my courage, but my understanding of the land itself. I followed it, deeper into the valley where the snow grew thicker and the trees closed in so tightly that the sky vanished. The world became a narrow corridor of white and black, the air heavy and metallic, carrying a scent of frost, stone, and something organic I could not name. I began to feel the exhaustion not just in my body, but in my mind. Hours blurred, snow shifted beneath my boots, and the trail twisted and doubled back on itself. I questioned my sanity, my memory, my perception, and yet I pressed forward. I had come to understand that fear was a compass more reliable than sight or reason. At the bottom of the valley, the creature led me to a cave I had never seen before, a gaping mouth in the cliffside, its darkness nearly swallowing the weak moonlight. Inside, the air was dense and cold, and I felt the faint vibration of something massive moving just beyond my vision. My flashlight revealed walls etched with strange patterns, grooves that seemed to pulse faintly under my touch. I traced them carefully, feeling the subtle shift of air as the cave seemed to breathe around me. A low growl resonated, not from a single point, but from all directions at once. I realized that the forest and the creature were one, intertwined in ways I could barely comprehend. I ventured deeper, guided by instinct and the shadow's silent insistence. The cave expanded impossibly, ceilings stretching beyond sight, the floor curving in ways that defied geometry. Stalactites hung like teeth, some sharp, some smooth, all ancient. And then I saw a figure, smaller than the shadow, but unmistakably human, crouched beside a pool of dark water. The figure stirred, turning to face me, but its features were blurred, distorted, almost as if the cave itself was refusing to let me see clearly. I froze, unable to tell whether it was alive, a hallucination, or part of the forest's trickery. The shadow moved to the edge of the chamber, observing silently, its amber eyes fixed on me as if waiting for my decision. I took a cautious step toward the figure. The air thickened, metallic and suffocating, and the growls rose in pitch, surrounding me like a living chorus. I understood then that the forest was testing me in ways I could not yet articulate. Fear, doubt, and reverence intertwined in a single living challenge. I pressed my hand to the water's surface and saw only a reflection of myself, twisted and pale, eyes wide with awe and terror. And in that reflection, I recognized the lesson. Survival is not about conquering fear, but about walking alongside it, understanding it, letting it teach you rather than consume you. I backed slowly, leaving the figure and the pool undisturbed, and the shadow followed me to the mouth of the cave, pausing once, as though acknowledging my comprehension. The snow outside was untouched, pristine, yet I felt the weight of the valley's intelligence pressing against me. I realized that the hikers I had been searching for might never be found, absorbed into the forest in ways I could not hope to explain. Yet the encounter was not about them. It was about me, about learning to navigate a wilderness that was alive, conscious, and unbound by human logic. Returning to my cabin that night, I felt a strange clarity. The fear I had carried for weeks no longer paralyzed me. It had become a guide, a companion, a lens through which to perceive the forest's truths. I realized that my obsession with mapping, with understanding, had blinded me to something simpler. The forest's intelligence, its subtle signals, its demands for respect and attentiveness. I began to study not just the trails, but the patterns in the snow, the way frost formed on branches, the subtle cues that marked the presence of life beyond human understanding. Over the following weeks, I continued my patrols, each journey through the forest more careful, more aware, more attuned to the unseen. I tracked signs that no map could represent. Shadows shifting against logic, footprints that vanished without trace, the faint vibrations of movement beneath the earth. The shadow appeared intermittently, always at the periphery, always guiding, never threatening, and I began to sense a rhythm, a pulse to the forest that was separate from any human time. I felt as though I had become part of a greater system, a participant in a dialogue that spanned centuries between land and shadow, between fear and comprehension. It was during one of these patrols near the heart of the forest that I finally understood the truth. The forest is not conquered, cannot be mapped fully, and does not reveal its secrets lightly. The trails move, the caves shift, shadows guide, and fear is both instrument and teacher. To survive here is not merely to walk without harm, but to observe, to listen, and to learn from every whisper, every shadow, every echo. The forest is a living adversary, but also a patient mentor, and those who approach with humility and awareness are given glimpses of knowledge that defy reason and measurement. Spring came slowly, tentative and cautious, brushing the forest ridges with pale green and soft blooms. The snow had melted, leaving trails slick with mud and the lingering scent of damp earth. The shadow had not appeared in weeks, yet its presence haunted me in ways I could not ignore. Every patrol, every step along the ridge, every glance into a hollow reminded me of what I had seen, what I had felt, and what the forest had demanded of me. I had changed. I was no longer the ranger who had first walked into Black Hollow, confident in maps and compasses. I was something else, alert, wary, attuned, carrying the weight of lessons that had no written form. It was on a particularly misty morning that I understood the full measure of the forest's intent. I had risen before dawn, the fog lying low, almost sentient, swirling around trees that had been silent sentinels for centuries. I followed a familiar trail, one I had walked dozens of times. Yet I noticed immediately that it was subtly wrong. Roots twisted in impossible directions. Rocks that I remembered flat now jutted at odd angles. The air hummed faintly, a vibration that penetrated my chest and made every hair on my body stand on end. I knew the shadow was here, somewhere beyond sight, observing, testing, shaping my path again. I followed the shifting trail down into a narrow valley, where mist clung like a living thing to the ferns and fallen logs. My boots sank into soft mud, and the scent of wet stone and decaying leaves mingled with a faint, metallic tang that made my stomach tighten. The forest's rhythm was clear now. The wind, the falling water, the creaking of branches, they were part of a language I was beginning to understand. And then I heard it. The knock. Soft, deliberate, precise. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. It was not a warning this time, but an invitation. I followed the sound to the edge of a cave I had mapped months before, the one where the shadow had first guided me toward understanding. The entrance was shrouded in mist, the walls slick with moisture. My flashlight trembled in my grip, not from cold, but from anticipation. And then I saw it, at the mouth of the cave, larger than I remembered, massive, and impossibly still. The amber eyes reflected the weak light, piercing and intelligent. The shadow did not move, but I felt it pulse, a rhythm that resonated with the forest itself. It was as if the land and the creature were one, and both were teaching me, silently, inexorably. I stepped into the cave, letting instinct guide me more than sight. The walls expanded impossibly, twisting in ways that defied logic. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic taps that echoed like a heartbeat. My flashlight caught the grooves etched in the stone, patterns that seemed to shift as I traced them with my hand. I realized with awe and unease that the cave was a living record, a history of the forest encoded in stone and shadow, a place older than memory, older than reason. The shadow followed, its presence palpable, a silent companion to my exploration. Hours passed, though I could not measure them. Time bent in the cave, stretching and folding around the pulse of the land. I traced the grooves, studied the patterns, felt the vibrations beneath my fingers. And then I understood. The forest had always been alive, conscious in ways humans could not fully grasp. The fear I had carried all these months was not weakness. It was a guide, a compass that had kept me alert, aware, and humble. Survival was not about conquering, but about listening, observing, and respecting. The shadow, the shifting trails, the impossible caves, they were all lessons in presence, patience, and reverence. When I finally emerged, dawn was breaking, pale light spilling over ridges and valleys. The forest seemed to sigh, the mist lifting as if acknowledging my passage. The trails I had walked 1,000 times now lay clear, though subtly transformed, reminding me that the wilderness is never static. The shadow had gone, leaving no trace but the memory, the lesson, and the deep understanding that fear and awe are inseparable companions in the wild. I realized then that the forest is not something to master, but something to honor. It shapes you, tests you, and if you are willing, teaches you in ways that are profound and humbling. Since that day, I patrol Black Hollow differently. I no longer map for the sake of certainty, no longer chase understanding that can be reduced to charts and coordinates. Instead, I move with awareness, attuned to the subtle signs of life and presence around me. I document cautiously, sketching trails and noting anomalies, but I do so with reverence, knowing that some truths are not meant for maps or records. The forest is a living adversary and mentor, beautiful and terrifying, demanding respect and patience. And in that understanding, I have found a clarity that is both frightening and exhilarating, a bond with the wilderness that defies reason but satisfies the deepest parts of the human spirit. I have come to accept that the shadow will appear again. I do not fear it. When it does, I will follow, guided by the instincts honed through months of observation, the awareness shaped by fear, and the humility taught by the land itself. I understand now that Black Hollow is not just a forest. It is a teacher, a guardian of ancient truths, and every trail, every cave, every whisper of wind is a part of its instruction. The shadow, the moving trails, the shifting caves, they are not threats, but mirrors of my own capacity to perceive, endure, and grow. And so I walk, day after day, patrol after patrol, carrying both vigilance and reverence in my heart. I tell myself the lessons silently, imprinting them into my bones. The forest is alive, fear is a guide, the unknown is not to be conquered, but to be understood. Each trail I walk, each ridge I cross, each hollow I explore is a continuation of a journey that began long before I was born, a dialogue between human and land that transcends time. The forest will always challenge, will always test, and will always shift. But in that challenge lies the gift, the ability to see, truly see, beyond fear into awe, and to walk the living trails with humility, courage, and respect. I am a ranger, but more than that, I am a student of the wilderness. And the forest, in its subtle, terrifying, and magnificent ways, is teaching me every day that the deepest truths are not written on maps or captured in words. They are lived, felt, and endured, one shifting step at a time. The first thing you need to understand is that the river was never on any map. Not on the old survey sheets we keep laminated in the back of the trucks, not on the satellite overlays the new hires like to rely on, not even in the tribal oral histories I cross-referenced after everything went wrong. It appeared overnight, wide as a 2-lane road, cutting clean through a stretch of old-growth cedar and hemlock thick enough that even sunlight needed permission to enter. And the worst part, the part that still keeps my brain chewing itself when the nights go quiet, is that I think I heard it before I ever saw it. A kind of rushing sound that wasn't rushing, more like breathing, slow, steady, rhythmic. So faint I thought it was my own pulse echoing in my ears. Except it came from the forest floor, from under the roots, like the land itself was exhaling. I should start properly, but I won't start gently. My name doesn't matter. My badge isn't real to me anymore. But I was a U.S. Forest Ranger, 17 years in uniform. I've responded to every kind of emergency a ranger can. Lost hikers, broken ankles, bear encounters, illegal campsites, domestic disputes in the backcountry, even one plane crash in 14 that still wakes me with the smell of burning pine sap. But none of it prepared me for the river that wasn't a river. People think we choose this job because we love nature. Some do. I didn't. I chose it because the wilderness is quiet and indifferent, and I needed quiet after losing someone out here. A girl, a teenager, a disappearance I can't talk about without feeling my throat close. It wasn't my fault, according to the investigation, but I was the one who found her pack, and I was the one who should have called off the search sooner before it broke her mother, before it broke me. Since then, I've walked the backcountry like a ghost, moving, searching, never saying out loud what I'm still looking for. Maybe that's why I noticed the sound before anyone else. Maybe the land knows who listens. It was mid-June, warm but with a wind carrying cold pockets like ice cubes sliding through the trees. I was patrolling a sector that hadn't changed in decades. No new trails, no blowdowns, no significant erosion. Routine. Boring. The kind of day where you start counting birdsong patterns just to stay awake. Then I heard the breathing. I stopped dead on the trail, one boot lifted, listening so hard my jaw locked. It came from my left, deeper into the undergrowth. I remember thinking, that's too steady for wind, too slow for an animal, too deliberate for water. I pushed through the branches. Moss brushed my legs like fingers. The air smelled wrong, wet, metallic, like rust mixed with something sweet. Heat radiated off the ground in waves even though the air was cool. And then I saw it, a river. Where the land should have risen into a small ridge, the earth had collapsed inward, forming a shallow valley filled with water so dark it looked black. No current, no surface movement, just a single ribbon of liquid threading through the woods like it had always been there, like it belonged. Except it didn't. I knew that stretch like I knew every scar on my hands. My radio crackled. You seeing this? It was Miller, another ranger in the district. Younger than me, too eager, too loud. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I was watching the water, trying to figure out why my reflection looked warped, stretched vertically, as if the surface wasn't flat, but angled downward, pulling the image of me into some deeper place. Yeah, I finally said. I see it. Where the hell did it come from? You think it's runoff? His voice was light but forced. I recognized the tone. I've used it myself. Deny the fear before it grows teeth. Runoff doesn't carve a channel overnight, I said. I crouched, touched the soil, wet, not saturated like the water had just arrived, and it's not flowing. Mine's flowing, he murmured. What? On my side. It's moving east. I looked again. My section of it was still as glass. Stay put, I told him. Already not moving. I followed the riverbank, noting how the trees leaned away from it as if pushed by years of erosion, even though this thing wasn't here yesterday. The cedar trunks closest to the water were pale, like the color had been drained out. One branch dripped with a resin that smelled like burnt hair. I kept walking until I reached Miller. He was standing stiff, face pale, pointing his flashlight at the water even though we didn't need it. His stretch of the river did move, barely, but enough to ripple the surface, and the sound... God, the sound wasn't water moving over rocks, it was whispering. Too quiet to distinguish words, too insistent to ignore. You hear that? He whispered. Probably, I began, but my voice cracked. I swallowed. Probably an acoustics thing, wind traveling through the fold in the valley. He gave me a look that said he didn't believe me and also needed to believe me. We contacted command. They told us to mark the perimeter, take photos, and stay until a hydrologist crew could be sent in the morning. Too dangerous to approach further, they said. Standard protocol. We camped 20 yards from the river. Neither of us slept. Around 3 a.m., the temperature dropped so fast our breath smoked. The river began making a new sound, something bubbling up from below, a rhythmic thumping like a heartbeat muffled by soil. I stood and scanned the tree line, convinced something was moving just out of view. Miller whispered, "Don't look at the water." But of course I did. My reflection was gone. Instead, I saw a silhouette standing where I stood, but taller, shoulders wrong, limbs too long, head tilted to the side like it was studying me from inside the water. I stumbled backward. Miller grabbed my arm. Did you? We didn't finish that sentence. We didn't need to. We waited for dawn like prey waiting for a predator to blink. When first light hit, we radioed command again. They said the hydrologist team was an hour away. Keep your distance. Maintain line of sight. Do not engage with civilians. Engage with civilians? I remember thinking, out here, something was wrong. Protocol didn't match the situation. Someone at command knew more than they were saying. At 6:12 a.m., I walked to the river to take updated photos. It was gone. Not dried up, not diverted, gone. The valley floor was intact, trees standing naturally, soil undisturbed, no marks, no erosion, no trace of water, as if the river had never existed. Miller swore under his breath and backed away like the ground might split open again. "Where did it go?" he whispered. I didn't answer, because I had noticed something worse. The pale cedar trees? Their color had returned. The resin drip was gone. But the tree closest to where the river had been had a handprint on it. Not a smudge, not mud. A distinct human-sized handprint pressed into the bark, sunken like something had pushed from the inside. 5 deep indentations, no blood, no debris, just the shape of a hand belonging to something strong enough to squeeze into solid wood. We contacted command. The hydrologists canceled. A different team arrived. Black uniforms, no insignia. One asked us to draw the river's path. Another used instruments I'd never seen before. A third took samples of the soil and burned them on site. I asked who they were. They didn't answer. By noon, they told us to forget what we saw. That was when I knew this wasn't natural. The river hadn't just vanished, it had moved, and it wanted us to follow it. The men in black uniforms didn't leave footprints. I noticed that first. The soil was soft, late spring moisture held under the needles. But as they moved around the site, taking readings, marking trees, sweeping devices over the ground that clicked like metal teeth chattering, nothing. Not a single indentation. Not even disturbed pine duff. Miller noticed too. He nudged me, his voice barely a breath. "They're not sinking. I see it," I whispered back. One of them turned in our direction, head tilting like he'd overheard something quiet enough that no human ear should have picked it up. His face was expressionless, eyes unreadable behind matte black glasses, but his mouth twitched, just once in a way that felt like a warning. We shut up. At 13:04, their leader approached us. I call him their leader because he was the only one who actually spoke, and not because he looked like he was in charge. If anything, he looked like a placeholder, a human-shaped outline filled with cold air. He said, "You will not record this incident in your reports." No introduction, no badge, no explanation. "We have to report any geological anomalies," I said, forcing my voice not to shake. "This was not geological," he replied. I waited for him to clarify, to give us something, anything. But he didn't. He turned to Miller. "Your body cam malfunctioned at 2:38 hours. You will file it as a hardware error." Miller stiffened. He hadn't turned on his body cam. Neither had I. "How do you know?" The man raised a hand. Its shadow stretched across the ground, yet didn't align with his body. It bent wrong, like light avoided him, like something behind him moved independently. "You will comply," he said, "for your own well-being." Then they left. No engine noise, no tire tracks, just gone, like they'd walked into a fold in the air. For a long time after, neither of us spoke. The forest went silent in the way forests do before a storm, every bird holding its breath, every insect pulling deeper into the bark. The air didn't move. "You ever seen anything like that?" Miller finally asked. "No," I said, but I was lying. Not because I'd seen people like them, but because I'd seen the aftermath of something similarly unnatural. The disappearance. The girl. Her pack found deep in a ravine where she never should have reached alone. A ravine that wasn't on any map either until the week she went missing. And when we finally documented it, it was gone. Just like the river. Some things in the wild don't stay in one place. Some things move when they want something. We marked the coordinates anyway. Against orders. Quietly, secretly. I don't know why. Maybe part of me hoped the river would return so I could understand what it wanted. We headed back to the station, walking in uneasy silence. Halfway there, Miller stopped. "You hear that?" I listened. The breathing sound again, deep, steady, resonant, coming from under the forest floor, but softer this time, farther away. Moving. "We're done for the day," I said. "Let's get back." He nodded, but sweat rolled down his temples even though the air had turned cold again, like winter brushing against the back of our necks. When we reached the station, we split up. He went to the gear shed. I went inside to file my report, the version I wasn't supposed to write. I wrote the real one first. Every detail, every sound, every shadow, every impossible thing. Then I saved it to an encrypted drive I keep hidden behind the insulation panel in my quarters. After that, I wrote the official one. The lie. Conducted routine patrol. No anomalies. I felt sick typing it. By dinner, Miller hadn't come back. I checked the trucks. His was gone. I checked the radio logs. No transmissions. I checked the shed. Empty. Door left open, his pack still on the floor. I found his phone inside his locker. Screen on, camera open. The last photo taken was of the tree line outside the station, dark, unfocused, with a faint line of something reflective behind the trunks. Something curved like water catching the light. A river. Flowing through the trees toward the station. Except there was no river outside. Only darkness. I radioed command. They told me they'd notify local law enforcement and coordinate a search at first light. Standard procedure again. Too standard, too calm. I didn't sleep. At 2:11 a.m., the station lights flickered. The air smelled like sulfur. The floor vibrated with a slow, rhythmic thumping, heavy, steady, patient, like footsteps below the building, like something passing under the station, following the foundations. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The forest was pitch black. No wind, no insects, no movement, just the sound of flowing. Faint. Everywhere. The river had returned, but not where it had been. I walked around the building, scanning the ground. My beam landed on something that made my heart stutter. A wet trail, reflective, leading from the forest right up to the steps of the station. Not blood, not water. Something thicker, clinging to the soil like oil. I crouched and touched it. Warm, it pulsed. A quiet vibration traveled up my fingertip into my hand, my arm, my chest. For a split second, I heard something, not with my ears, but with whatever part of the brain interprets dread. A voice, deep, low, speaking from within the earth. Come back. I staggered backward, wiping my hand on my pants. The warmth clung to my skin. Something moved in the tree line. A tall, thin silhouette, not barely distinguishable from the trunks. Too tall to be a person. Too still to be an animal. Head tilted, watching. I blinked. It was gone. Inside, I washed my hands until the skin reddened, but the warmth stayed under the surface, pulsing like a second heartbeat. I didn't radio command again. There was no point. I'd seen enough to know they already knew. By dawn, the warm trail had disappeared. My skin was cold again. The breathing under the soil stopped. The world reset to normal. The only proof left was Miller's absence. Search teams came and went. Dogs couldn't track him. Helicopters circled. Nothing. But on the third day, I found something. A boot print, his, by a drainage ditch off the old logging road. The ditch was empty, but the soil inside was wet, freshly disturbed, and it smelled faintly of rust and cedar and burnt hair. The smell of the river. I followed the ditch north until it disappeared into a wall of undergrowth. Beyond it was a place I never liked, a part of the forest that feels wrong even on the brightest days. The air shifts there. The trees grow too close together. Sound echoes in ways it shouldn't. I paused. The ground vibrated faintly beneath my boots. Breathing. Slow, steady, moving away from me, following a path, drawing me after it, leading me somewhere. Somewhere it wanted me to go. I should have turned back. I know that. Every instinct told me to. Every protocol. Every ounce of sense I had left. But I kept walking because I knew what this was now. It wasn't water. It wasn't geology. It wasn't natural. It was a trail, a lure, a path meant for someone who had already lost someone to a place like this. Someone like me. And when the earth opened beneath my feet, quietly, gently, like a mouth parting in anticipation, I fell into darkness without even screaming. Because a part of me had always known I'd end up back underground. Where she disappeared, where they all disappear, where the river goes when it's done being seen. I didn't fall far, maybe 6 feet, but when I hit the ground, the impact knocked the air out of me hard enough that I couldn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. My flashlight skittered away, spinning beams across the walls until it settled, pointing upward. The hole above me was already shrinking, soil shifting like it was being pulled closed by invisible fingers. I scrambled to my feet, coughing, grabbing the flashlight right as the last sliver of daylight vanished. Total darkness swallowed me. Not the normal, peaceful dark of caves or cabins or nights in the backcountry. This darkness felt thick, pressurized. It clung to my skin like humidity, but cold, so cold it tightened my lungs when I breathed. The smell hit next. Wet stone, metallic musk, cedar rot, and underneath it, something faint but unmistakable. The smell of Miller's jacket. The forest had dragged me underground to show me where he went. My beam cut a single tunnel through the black. The walls were packed earth mixed with veins of stone, smooth in places, clawed in others, as if something had dug here in multiple directions, multiple times. The tunnel wasn't natural. It had intention. Too smooth to be collapse, too stable to be erosion, too fresh to be old. As I stepped forward, the ground trembled faintly with every breath the tunnel exhaled. That was when I realized the sound was back. The same deep rhythmic breathing we'd heard that first night by the river. Except down here, it didn't sound distant. It sounded close, behind the walls, beside me, under my boots. Like something enormous lay just past the thin layer of earth, inhaling and exhaling, waiting. I moved slowly, one hand on the wall so I could feel the vibrations. If it changed rhythm, I'd run. If it got closer, I'd turn back. At least that was the lie I told myself. The truth was I wasn't going back. Not until I knew if Miller was alive. Not until I knew if she had been down here too, the girl who disappeared all those years ago. I knew it was irrational. I knew it was suicidal. But people like me, the ones who lose someone to the wild, we don't heal. We follow. The tunnel curved downward. My boots sank into mud that was warm enough to feel alive. Every few steps, I heard a soft splash and I'd freeze, lifting the flashlight to see if something had moved in the corner of my vision. Nothing ever did. But I felt watched. Not from ahead, from behind. I forced myself not to look. The beam of my flashlight flickered, once, twice. Then it steadied. I knew better than to trust electronics underground. Battery drains happen. Interference happens. But the timing felt deliberate, like something was testing how I reacted to the dark. After 10 minutes, the tunnel widened into a chamber so large my beam disappeared into its edges. Water pooled thinly across the floor, glassy, motionless, reflecting the ceiling like a warped mirror. I stepped slowly, checking depth. Shallow, maybe an inch. Then the surface rippled. Not from me. Something else had disturbed it. I crouched, lowering the beam. A footprint appeared in the water, freshly formed, the displaced ripples spreading outward toward me. A boot print. Miller's. Jesus, I whispered. Another appeared, closer this time, and another. A staggered line of wet prints moving toward the far side of the chamber, where the shadows thickened unnaturally, bending around a section of wall that looked deeper than the rest. The breathing sound faded, replaced by something worse. A whisper. Not words, not language. A voice trying to imitate sound, trying to imitate thought, trying to imitate me. It echoed in my skull more than in the chamber. Come back. I forced myself to breathe through the rising panic. Fear fogs judgment. Fear gets people killed. I'd taught that to rookies for years, but down there with the dark pressing like a physical weight on my chest, my training felt thin. I followed the footprints. Not because it was smart, because the alternative was turning around and facing whatever stood behind me. The far wall wasn't a wall at all. It was an opening. A doorway carved into the earth with geometric precision. Like something had pressed a perfect rectangular mold into the soil. The edges were sharp enough to cut. Dirt shouldn't do that. Dirt shouldn't behave like stone. Stone shouldn't behave like metal. I raised the beam to the top of the frame. Symbols. Carved. Repeating. Circular patterns interlinked with jagged lines. They looked older than the forest itself, older than the land. I reached out, touched one, the ground, pulsed, not the breathing, a heartbeat. One enormous, slow beat that shook dust from the ceiling. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time, vibrating through the chamber, through the walls. through my bones. Do you remember where she went? My stomach twisted. I stumbled backward, flashlight shaking. The chamber wasn't asking. The chamber was speaking. Or something inside it was. I backed away from the doorway, but the footprints ahead of me glistened, beckoning, freshening with each breath the earth took. Something moved in the darkness beyond the doorway, not walking, sliding. A shape tall enough to scrape the ceiling, its outline bending like a shadow cast from the wrong direction. My beam caught only edges, a shoulder, an elbow, a curve of a head that was too narrow, too long. I turned off my flashlight because I realized something too late. It could see the light. The darkness seemed to grow teeth. For a moment, one long, crushing moment, I stood perfectly still in pitch black. Every instinct screamed to run, but the air had shifted. The temperature dropped to freezing. Something cold brushed my ankle, not a touch, but a presence. Like a ribbon of icy air threading over my skin. I swallowed the panic and stepped backward. The whisper came again, inside my skull. She followed the river too. I felt nauseous. My legs trembled. Memories I'd buried clawed their way upward, the search party, the ravine, the torn backpack, the mother's screams. I'd told myself for years that she'd gotten lost, that she'd fallen, that the wilderness had claimed her the way it claims anyone reckless or unlucky. But the wilderness didn't move ravines. The wilderness didn't create rivers overnight. Something else did. And it wanted me to know that she had been taken the same way Miller was being taken now. I forced myself to turn the flashlight back on. The thing in the doorway was gone, but the footprints led inside. And carved into the floor, faint but unmistakable, was her name. Not written by hand, pressed into the earth like a signature. My breath caught. The symbols above the doorway pulsed faintly, reacting to the light, or to my presence. Behind me, something exhaled. Long, slow, cold. Then I heard water rushing, not gentle, not distant, the violent roar of a river that did not exist on the surface anymore. I swung the beam behind me. The chamber floor was now covered in shallow flowing water, rushing, building, rising. It sloshed against my boots, even though the ground remained perfectly level. The current pushed against me, as if trying to herd me into the doorway. For the first time since falling underground, I felt true panic. Animals get herded. Prey gets herded. This river, this thing, was forcing me forward. I turned back to the doorway. The symbols glowed red, pulsing, expectant. The footprints were the only solid trail. I stepped through. The doorway sealed behind me with a sound like soil inhaling. The light dimmed instantly. The air got thicker. The walls narrowed. Ahead, the tunnel sloped downward into a deeper darkness that seemed to move, like the shadows were swelling and receding with breath. I whispered into the dark, voice cracking, "Miller, if you're alive, make a sound." Nothing. Then, far ahead, in the deepest part of the tunnel, something mimicked my voice perfectly. Here, I froze. That wasn't Miller. Whatever lived down here didn't need to drag us underground. It could simply call us forward. I knew the voice wasn't Miller's before the last syllable finished echoing. It was too clean, too exact. No ragged breath, no tremor of fear, no human imperfection at all. Just a flawless replay of my own voice, projected from far down the tunnel like a recording played through a speaker buried in the earth. But I still took a step forward. That's the thing people never understand about rangers who've lost someone out here. We don't move toward hope. We move toward guilt. And guilt will get you killed before fear ever will. The tunnel narrowed so much my shoulders brushed both walls. Dirt rained lightly from the ceiling every time the ground exhaled. The smell grew stronger, metallic like old blood, sweet like rotting cedar, sharp like wet stone. My flashlight beam bent oddly in the space, angling like the air itself was thick enough to refract it. The tunnel ahead pulsed again. Not a trick of the light. The walls genuinely moved with breath. Out, in, like I was walking down the throat of some buried thing. The whisper, my own voice, came again, softer this time. Here. Please. Here. The second word stretched unnaturally, the vowel drawn out like something testing the limits of imitation. My skin crawled. I lifted the flashlight and tried to orient myself, but the beam fell on something that made me stop cold. finger marks, dozens of them, pressed into the dirt walls as though people had clawed their way forward or backward, leaving trails of desperation. Some shallow, some deep enough to have torn nails free. A few trailed downward, carving thin, frantic lines into the floor. Miller had been through here. Others had too. And some of them had been dragging themselves. My throat tightened. I raised my hand to touch one of the deeper gouges. The dirt around it was warm, fresh. A drip of water hit my wrist, then another. I pointed the flashlight up. The ceiling wasn't earth anymore. It was root structure, thick, tangled, woven together like muscle fibers soaked in black water. Between the roots, liquid seeped out in steady droplets, falling onto my shoulders, my hair, my face. Cold. Too cold. I wiped my cheek and looked at my hand. No water. Just a thin smear of something clear, oily, reflective. It smelled faintly of sulfur and pine sap, the same smell that followed the river. Not water, I muttered. My voice sounded small in the breathing tunnel. Behind me, something shuffled. I spun, light cutting across the narrow passage. Nothing. Just the same long corridor of pulsing earth. But the shuffle wasn't imaginary. I'd felt the vibration in the floor. I kept moving. 20 steps later, the tunnel widened abruptly, not into a chamber, but into a perfect geometric turn. A 90-degree angle carved into soil with surgical precision. Nature doesn't make lines like that. People do. Or something that wants to mimic what people build. The corner had symbols etched into it. Not the circles from before. These were horizontal lines, grouped in sets of 4, then 3, then 1. Crude scratches, but too deliberate to be random. I reached out, hesitating, then touched the lowest set. The tunnel shuddered. Not violently, like it had just woken up. My flashlight flickered, once, twice. Then a low hum filled the air, vibrational and deep, like standing too close to a massive transformer. The whisper came again, but this time it wasn't my voice. It wasn't anyone's voice. It was a low, wet sound like air being drawn through a throat filled with water. Something trying to speak, trying to form words, trying to copy. I turned the corner, and the world changed. The tunnel opened into a vast cavity, so tall my beam couldn't find the ceiling. The walls sloped outward, ribbed with root-like structures that pulsed faintly with a reddish glow. Water sheeted thinly down the surfaces, collecting in a shallow pool across the entire floor. But the pool wasn't still. It rippled, constantly, like something beneath it was breathing. At the far end of the chamber stood a shape, human-sized, motionless. "Miller," I whispered. The shape didn't move. I stepped into the water. It was warm, warmer than blood. The sensation crawled up my ankles, through my calves like I was standing in the thermal exhale of an animal. "Miller," I said louder. My voice echoed strangely, delayed by half a second, as if something repeated it from the other side of the chamber. I moved closer. 5 steps in, I stopped again. Not because of fear, because the shape had no shadow. Everything in that chamber cast a shadow. Roots, stones, my own body, but the figure at the far wall absorbed the light cleanly, without reflection or outline. I raised the flashlight. "Miller, if that's you, turn around." The figure did turn, but it wasn't Miller. It wasn't anything close to Miller. The thing facing me was tall, too tall. Its proportions stretched like someone had tried to draw a human from memory and got the measurements wrong. Its skin was dark and smooth like wet stone. Its arms hung too long, reaching to its knees. Its head tilted with a slow, bird-like curiosity, as if studying me the way a wolf studies something dying. But the worst part was the face. It didn't have one. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, no features. Just a smooth surface with faint impressions, like something underneath was trying to push outward to form expressions it wasn't designed to make. I took a step back. The figure mirrored me. I stepped left. It stepped left, not delayed, instant, perfect. Like it was learning my movements. The chamber vibrated with the rushing sound again, like the river beneath the earth was roaring. The water around my boots rippled toward the figure, drawn as though gravity had shifted. I whispered, "What are you?" And the chamber whispered back in my voice, "What are you?" The thing lifted one arm, bending it wrong at the elbow. The skin rippled outward, shaping into a crude imitation of a hand. A handprint. The same shape I'd seen on the cedar tree the morning the river vanished. My vision tunneled. My breath came short. The whisper rose again, frantic now, emanating from every wall. Come back, come back, come back. My flashlight dimmed. The chamber darkened. The figure began to step toward me with slow, deliberate movements, each footfall sending a wobble through the water, each step synchronized with the heartbeat of the ground. Behind me, something moved fast. I turned just in time to see a second figure slide out of the tunnel I'd come from, smooth, featureless, tall. It stepped into the chamber, then another, and another. 5 in total, forming a semicircle behind me, cutting off the exit, their heads tilted in eerie unison. The river sound grew deafening. I spun back to the first figure. It had closed half the distance. 10 feet. 8, 6. I lifted the flashlight like a weapon, even though I knew it wasn't, and the thing paused, studying the object in my hand as though deciding how to copy it. Its arm elongated, the skin stretched. A shape emerged at the end, an imitation of the flashlight's silhouette, long and narrow. Not functional, not real, just mimicry. Broken mimicry. That was when I heard it, a human voice somewhere to my right, weak, gasping. Help! Miller, I swung the beam toward the sound. He was half submerged in the water, half pinned against the far wall by a root-like tendril curled tightly around his chest. His face was pale, eyes wide with terror, one arm outstretched toward me. Help me, he whispered. Please. But his lips didn't move, not a millimeter. The voice was coming from somewhere else. Somewhere inside the chamber. Something was mimicking him too. His eyes shifted to the figure approaching me. He shook his head violently. Don't let it touch you, he mouthed silently. The figure stepped closer. 3 feet. 2. The water rose around my ankles, swirling upward in spirals, gripping like hands. The whispers converged into a single guttural sound vibrating through my skull. Stay. I realized then, the river didn't want to drown us. It wanted to keep us. It wanted to fill itself with people. It wanted to learn us. And it was done asking. My instincts finally overrode the paralysis. I didn't think. I moved. I lunged sideways, away from the approaching figure, splashing through the warm water so hard it slopped up my legs. The mimics behind me reacted instantly, their long limbs jerking like startled insects, arms outstretched, fingers too many and too thin, trying to block every path I could take. But they weren't coordinated. Not yet. They were still learning how to hunt. The water surged after me. It didn't move like liquid. It moved like muscle, rising, curling, lashing at my boots like it had purpose. The ground vibrated under it. Every pulse synchronized with the mimics as if the entire chamber, water and walls and creatures, were one organism. Miller gasped again, though his mouth didn't open. The sound rattled around the chamber, bouncing off roots and stone. His real voice, if he even still had one, remained trapped behind his lips. His eyes followed me with a frantic clarity I hadn't seen in days. He wasn't begging for me to save him. He was begging me to run. But there was no path out. The door I entered through had sealed. The chamber walls rose like the ribs of something ancient. The mimics closed in slowly, patient, confident, like they knew I'd run out of space. The water swirled tighter around me, gripping my ankles, calves, thighs, warm, alive, strong. I felt my skin sting where it touched, as though tiny hooks were pulling outward, testing the shape of me. I staggered back toward the center of the cavern, flashlight trembling in my hand. The first figure, the tall one with the nearly shaped face, moved with a kind of curiosity, bending its head like an owl mimicking human curiosity. It lifted its elongated arm again, that crude imitation of a hand trembling into more detail, more shape, not copying the flashlight now, copying me. The other mimics followed, raising their arms, forming hands out of fluid skin, fingers lengthening, splitting, moving independently like they were learning to articulate. They were becoming people, or they were becoming versions of us, of everyone who'd ever been taken. I felt walls closing in, not physically, psychologically. The chamber breathed, inhaled, exhaled, and every breath pressed against my skull until I felt dizzy. The air smelled like wet fur and burning cedar. The temperature dropped until I could see my breath fog the beam. Then the whisper came again. Not my voice this time. Not Miller's. A woman's. Soft. Familiar. Devastating. Come back. My throat closed. I spun, scanning the chamber, searching for the source, even though I already knew. That voice belonged to the girl who disappeared. The one I failed. The one I never found. But the whisper came from the walls, from the water, from under my skin. A mimicry of memory, scraped from the inside of my skull like something was rifling through everything I'd ever feared. Stop, I said. My voice cracked. Stop using her voice. The chamber whispered it back perfectly. Stop using her voice. I fought the urge to drop to my knees. Miller strained against the root coil, pinning him. His fingers twitched, not in desperation, but in warning. His gaze fixed on something behind me. I turned slowly. One of the mimics had moved closer without making a sound, a yard away, maybe less. Its face had changed. It still had no eyes, no mouth, but impressions now swelled under the skin, creating shallow hollows where features should be. A faint nose ridge, indents where eyes belonged, muscles forming under artificial skin. It wasn't just mimicking me, it was studying me. I realized then what the river was. Not water, not a creature, a system, a thing that collected, that copied, that learned the shape and sound and memory of whatever fell into it. People weren't taken by accident, they were chosen, absorbed, studied, replicated. The chamber shook with a deep thud, a heartbeat, a call. The mimics all turned toward the sound. That was my only chance. I bolted, not toward the door, it was gone. I ran toward the far wall where the water flowed in a thin sheet, the stone glistening like glass. The mimics reacted too slow to block me. They weren't used to prey that moved unpredictably. The water reached for me, rising in tendrils. I reached the wall, slammed my hands into the flow, expecting cold. But it was hot, boiling hot. I screamed and jerked back, skin blistering, but my right hand hit something solid behind the water, a seam in the stone, thin as a hairline crack. A door. A hidden passage. I shoved my shoulder against it, pushing with everything I had, ignoring the pain in my hands. The seam gave slightly back, stone grinding against stone. Behind me, the mimics moved, suddenly coordinated. They slid across the chamber, long limbs folding, unfolding, their movements sharpening, becoming more human, becoming more like us. Something grabbed my ankle. A hand. Too many fingers. I kicked hard, boot connecting with what felt like rubbery cartilage. The grip loosened. I slammed my body into the seam again. It gave an inch. The chamber roared, the rushing sound rising into a deafening, violent wave. The water surged upward, slamming into me like a living current. My body hit the stone hard. My ears rang. The mimic's arms stretched toward me, merging with the current. The river was pulling itself into the room, and I was in the way. I shoved again, another inch. A blast of cold air surged from inside the crack. Real air. Outside air, something beyond this chamber breathed differently. Behind me, Miller made a strangled sound. Real, not mimicked. I glanced back. He was sinking, the water pulling him down, his skull sliding under, eyes locked on mine, wide with a final desperate plea. He mouthed one word. Run. The chamber exhaled, a sound like the entire underground world inhaling to swallow me. I threw myself at the crack one last time. The stone gave. The doorway broke open, not fully, but enough for me to slip through. I squeezed inside as the water lunged upward in a tidal surge. Something brushed my back, fingers, claws, water, memory. I didn't know. I tumbled into the narrow passage beyond. The door slammed shut behind me. No sound, no light, no pursuit, just silence. For the first time since falling underground, the earth stopped breathing. My hands dripped blistered skin. My legs shook. My lungs felt shredded, but I was alive. I crawled through the passage on hands and knees until the air changed, cooler, sharper, smelling of pine again. When I finally saw a sliver of daylight ahead, I sobbed once, quietly, the sound swallowed by the tight corridor. I emerged through a narrow fissure in a hillside a half-mile from where the river first appeared. Above me, the forest was still. No breathing, no whispers, no river. The world had reset again. I stumbled back to the station at dusk. Command was waiting, not the usual command. The black uniformed team. Their leader stepped forward, face unreadable. You survived, he said, not surprised. I stared at him, shaking. There's something down there. It's taking people. It took Miller. We know. Then why didn't you? It learns from contact, he said. I froze. He continued. And now it knows you. The world tilted under my feet, a cold realization creeping up my spine. The river wasn't done. It had let me go, to follow me, to learn me, to wait. The man in black stepped aside, revealing a case held by another operative. From now on, the leader said, you will tell us the moment you feel the ground breathe. He leaned in, because it will come back. I wish I could tell you I ran, quit, escaped this place, but the truth is simpler. I can feel it now, beneath the floorboards, every night, slow, steady, closer. The river moved once, it will move again, and the next time it surfaces, it won't disappear by morning. I still remember the moment I realized I had stepped somewhere that wasn't meant to be on any map. It was a crisp autumn morning, but the air carried a taste of rot, faint and metallic, that no forest should have in early October. I was checking trailheads along the northern ridge of the park, a routine patrol that had always lulled me into a false sense of control. I had spent nearly a decade as a forest ranger, the kind of years that bury your enthusiasm under layers of paperwork and small tragedies. The missing hiker in June, the boy who drowned in that icy creek, the endless reports of poachers who slipped through legal loopholes. I was used to grief. I wasn't used to this. I can't pinpoint when the unease started. Maybe it was the way the trees seemed older, twisted into shapes I didn't recognize. Branches leaned toward me like arms reaching for something I didn't want to give. The path, a narrow dirt track I had walked countless times, ended abruptly at a wall of moss-covered stone that no human hand had laid. At first, I thought it was a cliff, but the ground didn't fall away. There was a hollow, yawning space beneath the stone, like the forest itself had swallowed something whole. I crouched, flashlight cutting through the darkness below. There was a smell, wet like iron and decay, and a faint whispering, almost imperceptible, like wind playing tricks. I shook my head. Just the wind, I told myself. Rangers always rationalize the irrational. It's the only way we survive. Yet the whispering seemed to shape itself into syllables, words I couldn't quite hear. My throat tightened, and I wanted to leave, but curiosity pinned me in place. I found an opening, just large enough to squeeze through. The soil was slick with mud, and roots reached down like fingers, grasping at my boots. Inside, the air shifted. It was warmer than the autumn chill outside, and the smell was stronger, sulfur mixed with something acrid, a hint of burnt hair. My rational mind screamed at me to turn back, but I had gone too far. The tunnel curved beneath the ridge, and I realized it wasn't natural. The walls were lined with something smooth, polished in sections, almost reflective. I caught my reflection once, pale and trembling, but something in the surface didn't quite match me. My lips moved, my eyes blinked, but my expression was wrong. Too slack, too still, like the forest had borrowed me for a moment to see if it could. I pressed forward, boots squelching in mud, trying to ignore the tremor in my hands. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the curved walls. Sometimes they called my name, sometimes they laughed. Not human laughter, not quite. I told myself it was my mind, frayed from years of watching the woods swallow people whole. But the voice wasn't my imagination. Somewhere in the dark, something was alive and aware of me. Hours, or maybe minutes, I can't say, passed. The tunnel opened into a cavern that smelled of wet stone and old blood. I swear I saw footprints in the mud, not mine, not human. They moved in circles, as if whatever had walked here didn't care about direction, only about presence. My flashlight flickered, and I caught movement at the edge of the beam. A silhouette, hunched too fast to identify, darting behind a stalagmite. I froze. My breath came shallow. I tried calling out, but my voice sounded wrong, swallowed by the cavern. That's when I noticed the walls etched, scratched, as if by fingernails or maybe claws. Some markings were human, letters I couldn't read. Others, symbols, jagged and uneven, like someone, or something, had been trying to speak in a language older than the park itself. I felt the weight of every story I had ignored. The hikers who vanished without trace, the hunters who never returned, the journal entries of rangers long before me, all ending abruptly. They had all been here, and none of them had left. I should have turned back. I should have run. But when I tried, the tunnel had changed. The opening I had crawled through was gone. In its place, stone pressed against stone as if the forest itself had swallowed me whole. Panic surged, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. I was a ranger. I had survived bear attacks, snowstorms, and floods. I could survive this. Then I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough to burn the image into my mind. A figure at the far end of the cavern, motionless, facing me. Its shape was vaguely human, but wrong. Limbs too long, head tilted at an impossible angle, eyes reflecting my flashlight with a knowing, cold intelligence. It didn't move when I moved. It didn't need to. The air itself seemed to vibrate with its presence. I realized with a sickening clarity that it had been following me the entire time, hiding in shadows, waiting. I spoke, trying to assert control, to make it human, to make it explain itself. "Who's there? Show yourself." My words bounced back, distorted. The thing didn't respond, but the shadows around it stretched, almost reaching toward me, curling like smoke. I felt a pressure on my chest, like the air itself was trying to crush me. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Gas pockets, echoes, hallucinations. But I couldn't shake the primal knowledge that this was intelligent, aware, and patient. Hours, maybe minutes, later, I found myself crawling over smooth stone into a secondary tunnel. The whispering followed, echoing, shifting voices. Sometimes children crying, sometimes a man shouting, sometimes my own voice mocking me. I told myself these were memories, fragments of past rangers trapped in the forest. Maybe they were. Or maybe they were a warning. The tunnel opened again, and I stumbled into a space that had once been a mine, or maybe a military installation, I couldn't tell. Rusted metal walls, broken lights, the smell of old chemicals. I thought I was alone until I heard footsteps. Not mine, not the figure from before. Something soft, padded, deliberate. I froze, every instinct screaming to run. Then a voice, human this time, whispered from the darkness, "You shouldn't have come here." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had gone dry and my mind was fraying. I crouched behind a rusted support beam, straining to see. The figure emerged from shadow, older than human, or maybe just wrong, a face that shifted subtly whenever I tried to focus. It looked like someone I knew. No, someone I lost, a ranger who vanished years ago. I screamed in my mind, trying to tell myself it wasn't real. I knew it was. And then I noticed the walls. The entire corridor, every inch, was covered in scratches, symbols, letters, and faces printed in the metal as if the past victims were trapped within the structure itself, trying to warn me, or perhaps trying to pull me in. The floor vibrated, faintly at first, then violently, like the building itself was breathing, or angry. Something was beneath me, something vast. I couldn't move, I couldn't rationalize. The figure advanced slowly, deliberately, almost dancing between shadows and light. Every instinct told me to run, but the tunnel had no end in sight. I whispered to myself, "You're trained, you've survived everything." But it was hollow. The weight in the air pressed down, and I realized the forest, or whatever this place was alive in a way I had never believed. Alive, patient, and hungry. I reached out, touching the wall, and it felt warm, pulsing almost, like a heartbeat. A whisper from behind made me spin. "It's waiting for you to see it." My flashlight swung wildly, illuminating a glimpse of the figure, now inches away, impossibly close. I felt the ground shudder under me. Something moved below, something heavy, something that didn't belong to the earth. I backed up, stumbled, almost fell, and that's when the lights went out completely. Pitch black. The smell of sulfur and rot intensified. I could hear breathing all around me, yet I couldn't see a thing. My rational mind splintered. I tried to count, to measure, to anchor myself. Nothing worked. I could only feel the presence circling, waiting. And then, in the complete silence, a single low whisper, "You belong here now." I remember the blackness stretching endlessly, a void so thick it felt as if I had entered the lungs of the forest itself. My hands groped blindly along the metal walls, slick with condensation and something that felt like sweat, though the air was frigid. Every step sent tiny tremors through the floor, as if something enormous were pacing beneath me. My rational mind screamed for explanations, settling beams, air pockets, but the fear in my chest wasn't logic. It was knowing. I was being hunted by the memory of this place, by its patience, by its awareness. Then I felt it, an almost imperceptible brush against my ankle, like a fingernail dragging across my skin. I froze, heart hammering, listening. Nothing moved in the echo of my flashlight. I tried to convince myself it was a root or my imagination, but I knew better. The brush came again, deliberate, teasing, testing my resolve. My stomach dropped. I had been alone in the wilderness countless times, but never like this, never with something that could mimic intent. The whispers returned, now clearer, closer. They weren't calling my name anymore. They were mocking me. I could hear the faintest hint of my own voice in the chorus, distorted, frightened, shaking. Turn back, it hissed, over and over, layering on itself until I couldn't tell which voice was mine and which was not. I tried to scream, but my throat refused to cooperate. My voice had already been stolen. I stumbled forward blindly, pressed against walls that seemed to breathe, the metal pulsing beneath my fingertips. My flashlight flickered again, and in a brief moment of illumination, I saw something that made me vomit where I stood. The wall opposite me had faces, hundreds of them, pressed into the metal, eyes wide with terror, mouths frozen in silent screams. Some faces twisted into expressions I knew too well. Those of missing hikers, rangers I had met in passing, people I had investigated, people I had failed. My knees buckled. And I clawed at the wall, trying to shake them off. But the faces were cold, unyielding, alive in a way that burned memory into bone. I pulled myself together, dragging my boots along the slick floor, following a faint draft that smelled faintly of decay and iron. I didn't know where it led. I only knew that moving meant survival. Eventually, the corridor opened into a wide chamber, and I realized this was the heart of whatever nightmare I had stumbled into. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, and the walls were carved with tunnels spiraling downward and outward, like the roots of some massive tree or the veins of a diseased body. From somewhere below, I heard it, the slow, deliberate creak of something enormous moving, not wood, not earth, but muscle and intent. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there, waiting. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to suppress the shaking in my hands, trying to rationalize, to catalog, to observe. That's what rangers do, observe. But observation became futile when the cavern itself seemed to watch back. Shadows stretched and lengthened as my flashlight swept across the chamber. Sometimes I caught glimpses of movement, figures at the edge of vision, just out of reach, flickering between perception and impossibility. They weren't running, they weren't hiding, they were waiting, patient as stone. Then I found the mine entrance partially collapsed, its mouth yawning like a predator's. I thought about retreating, but the tunnel behind me seemed to close in, the walls narrowing, the whispers growing louder, more personal. One voice, familiar, intimate, whispered in my ear. "You were supposed to stay outside." I whipped around. No one was there. The voice wasn't human. It had no body, no source, just the intelligence of the forest or the cavern or whatever entity had claimed this place. I had no choice. I crawled into the mine. The air inside was thick with dust and the stench of decay, chemical and organic mixed in a way that should not coexist. My flashlight illuminated beams, broken rails, carts tipped on their sides, and more symbols scratched into the walls. Some human, some impossible. I realized these tunnels weren't old. They had been used recently. Something had been living here, something patient, something that waited for trespassers. Footsteps followed me, soft and deliberate. I spun, swinging my flashlight, but nothing was there. Yet the vibrations underfoot told me the truth. Whatever was in here moved not to chase, but to observe, tracking, cataloging my fear. My heart raced as the tunnel twisted sharply downward, the air warmer now, humid, as though I had descended into the lungs of the earth. I could feel something breathing alongside me, synchronized with my own pulse. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, tried to tell myself I was still in control, but every instinct screamed against that lie. Then I saw the first human figure, or at least it had once been human. Hunched in a corner, covered in mud and streaked with blood, the person, or thing, didn't move. But when my light fell on the face, my stomach lurched. It was a ranger from years ago, someone I had known personally, lost on a patrol I had investigated. Their eyes were wide, blank, staring at nothing. They opened their mouth to speak, but only a gurgle came out. The light flickered, and when it steadied, they were gone. I knew they had never left. The forest, or the mine, had taken them in a way I couldn't rationalize. I moved forward, past the echoes of suffering, past the shapes and the shadows that mimicked those I had loved and lost. The mine curved again, spiraling downward, and I came to a chamber larger than I could comprehend. In its center, a pit gaped like a wound in the earth. The walls vibrated faintly, the air thick and oppressive. And in the pit, I saw movement, slow, deliberate, too massive to be human. Something alive, something ancient, something aware. My mind refused the concept. My body, however, recognized danger I couldn't outrun. I wanted to turn back. Every rational fiber in my being demanded retreat. But as I moved, I realized the tunnels had changed again. Open passages behind me had sealed. The walls shifted subtly, forcing me onward. And then I understood. This place didn't just contain things. It hunted. It molded itself to my fear, to my memory, to my guilt. I had survived so many losses outside, but here, survival wasn't enough. The forest, or the mine, was patient. It could wait longer than I could endure. The whispers returned, more personal, more urgent. They reminded me of every failure. The boy in the creek, the poacher I couldn't catch, the hikers who disappeared while I slept in ranger stations. They mocked me for remembering, for caring, for being human. And then, among them, I thought I heard my own voice pleading, "I'm sorry, I'll leave. I'll leave." But saying it aloud changed nothing. The darkness didn't care. The pit didn't care. Whatever waited below didn't care. I saw movement at the edge of my flashlight again. Figures, human-shaped, crouched, waiting. One stepped forward. Its face shifted, becoming familiar and alien at once, as if it were reading my memory and reshaping itself to comfort and terrify me simultaneously. I stumbled backward, tripping over a loose beam, and fell hard against the wall. The vibration beneath me intensified, and I felt the ground pulse like a heartbeat, synchronizing with my own until I could no longer distinguish between them. And then I heard it. Above, below, all around, the thing moving in the darkness, something so massive it could have been the roots of the mountain itself, or something older. Its sound was a low hum, almost musical, resonating through my bones, carrying intention. I realized with a terror that burned my throat that it knew me. Not just my body, not just my scent or my fear. It knew my history, my failures, my guilt, my very soul. I had no choice. I descended toward the pit. I don't know why. Maybe it was compulsion, maybe madness. My flashlight shook in my hand, sweat stinging my eyes. I looked into the pit, and for a fleeting moment I thought I could see all the lost souls, the rangers, the hikers, the hunters, pressed into the walls, into the mud, into the shadows, watching me. They weren't warning me. They were welcoming me. I stepped closer. The vibration underfoot became intolerable, synchronized with my own heartbeat. And then I heard the whisper that finally shattered any remaining rational thought. You belong here now. I froze. I tried to run. My legs refused. The pit seemed to stretch, swallowing light, swallowing sound, swallowing me. I fell forward, hands scraping along the slick stone, and in that moment of terror I saw it fully. A mass of shifting shadows, human-shaped yet impossible, intelligence glowing like embers in the darkness, observing me with patience older than the mountains themselves. I screamed, though the sound was absorbed instantly, leaving only the thrum of its presence. I don't remember how I survived, or if I truly did, but the forest claimed me in a way I cannot explain. And now, whenever I patrol the park, I know which section is erased from maps, why hikers vanish without a trace, why the whispers sometimes follow me back to my cabin at night. The forest remembers every scream. It hunts memory as much as flesh. And I have learned the hard way that some doors are never meant to be opened. I can feel it still, every time I close my eyes. The memory isn't fading, it's alive, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I never truly left that mine, or the forest. Even here in the so-called safety of the ranger station, the edges of reality blur. The walls of my cabin seem too close, too suffocating, and sometimes just out of the corner of my eye, I swear I see movement. Shapes crouched, watching, patient. The whispers come in dreams, sometimes in waking hours, like reminding me of what waits below. I returned to the mine once, driven by a compulsion I cannot explain. The authorities said it was impossible. Collapsed tunnels, decades of disuse, but I knew better. The entrance was gone when I found it, replaced by a solid wall of earth and roots, but beneath it I could feel a pulse, faint like the heartbeat of a predator. My flashlight barely penetrated the gloom, but I followed anyway, crawling through mud and rubble, guided by instinct and terror. The deeper I went, the more I understood the mine, or the entity that claimed it, was alive in ways that defied logic. The walls breathed, the air vibrated with unseen force, and the shadows shifted to watch me. I saw faces again, pressed into stone and metal, some screaming, some calm, all watching. They were not memories, not echoes. They were presences, trapped in anticipation, waiting for the next intruder. I reached the central chamber. The pit still yawned, wider than I remembered, deeper than sanity would allow, and something moved within it. Not entirely visible, yet aware, intelligent, patient. My rational mind told me to step back, to flee, but the forest, or the thing, had rewritten the rules. Movement was mandatory, observation inevitable. I saw forms at the edge of the pit, shapes that mimicked humans I had loved and lost. They smiled at me, their eyes held recognition, familiarity, and horror all at once. The whispers crescendoed, layering over themselves until I could no longer distinguish my own thoughts. They spoke in voices of the missing. The boy in the creek, the hikers lost in storms, rangers who vanished on routine patrols. Their words were warnings, or perhaps invitations. "Come," they said. "Join us." And I realized, with a clarity that made my blood run cold, that this was not a place where survival mattered. Survival was irrelevant. The forest, the mine, the entity, it collected. It didn't hunt for food. It hunted for awareness, for memory, for souls that remembered too much, that questioned too much. I tried to rationalize again, desperately, my last lifeline. Hallucination, exhaustion, the cumulative trauma of years patrolling these woods. But the thing below was deliberate. I could feel it, senses extending beyond human comprehension, calculating, waiting for the exact moment to ensnare me. The vibration beneath my boots matched my pulse perfectly, and I realized the entity had synchronized with me. It knew me. It had been learning me since the moment I entered this cursed section of the park. I moved forward. Every step was a negotiation with madness. The flashlight trembled in my grip, illuminating fleeting glimpses of figures that weren't quite solid. Limbs too long, torsos bent in impossible ways, faces that smiled but never blinked. They mimicked humans, yet betrayed some hidden truth, some cosmic intelligence that made my stomach heave. And then I heard the single word, a whisper low and insistent, vibrating through the metal walls, through the stone, through me. Belong. I fell to my knees at the edge of the pit, chest heaving, mind fraying. My hands grazed the surface of the mud and stone, slick with moisture and decay. I realized in that instant that this was the forest's intent, its intelligence. It wanted recognition. It didn't need to touch me. It only needed me to see it, to acknowledge it, to understand that this section of the park was not wilderness. It was a graveyard, a cathedral, a prison. And the thing at the center, the core of it all, was patient. Eternally patient. The figures around the pit shifted suddenly, moving with impossible speed to surround me. Each one took a form I recognized. The missing, the dead, the people whose loss I had carried like stones in my chest. Their eyes bore into me, accusing, welcoming, demanding. One step closer, tilting its head in that impossibly wrong angle. Its voice, distorted yet eerily familiar, whispered in my ear, We've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, falling into the pit. The ground beneath me wasn't solid. It gave way, yet didn't. I felt suspended, trapped between air and stone, between the world of the living and the world that waited beneath the forest. Shapes moved around me, above me, beneath me. Some reached for me with limbs that bent like branches, others simply watched, knowing that resistance was futile. And then silence. Not peaceful silence. The silence of inevitability. The kind that presses into your skull and weighs down every thought. In that silence, I felt the thing beneath me, the entity at the core of the park, something older than humans, older than the forest, patient. It didn't speak. It didn't move. It existed in every vibration, every shadow, every breath I took. And I realized, with a terror that had no name, that I had been chosen, or perhaps observed, or perhaps marked. I could not leave this place without taking a part of it, and it a part of me. I don't know how long I remained there. Time lost meaning. Minutes became hours. Hours became centuries. Every attempt at thought was assaulted by the whispers, the figures, the walls. My mind teetered on the edge of collapse, and I understood why rangers vanish here. Not because the forest kills them outright, but because it doesn't need to. It reshapes you, absorbs you, makes you part of the memory it keeps. When I finally stumbled back, if back is even a word that applies, the mine entrance was gone. Earth, roots, and stones sealed it perfectly, as if it had never existed. I was alone, yet not alone. I carry the pulse of that pit in my chest, the whispers in my ears when the wind blows through the trees, the pressure in the air when I walk along any ridge. I know the forest is waiting, watching, learning. I patrol now as I always have, but with a knowledge I cannot share. I watch hikers with hollow eyes, my own reflection in the water sometimes twisted, wrong, a warning. I see shadows where none should exist, hear whispers where no wind blows. Some nights I swear I feel the fingers of the lost brushing against me, reminding me that one day I too may join the memory of this place. Maps no longer mark the northern ridge. The Park Service acts as though it doesn't exist. The public thinks the area is inaccessible, overgrown, impassable. They are wrong. I know better. That section of the park is erased for a reason. The forest remembers every scream, every misstep, every moment of fear. It does not forgive. It does not forget, and it waits for the curious, the careless, the guilt-ridden, and the trained alike. I have survived, for now, but the entity beneath the mine, the whispers, they are patient, eternally patient, and one day it will call again. I know this because I can still hear the low, insistent vibration in the earth beneath my feet, and every time the wind brushes my face, I swear I hear the same words, echoing through the bones of the mountains, "You belong here now." The first time I realized the forest could fold in on itself like a living thing, quietly, invisibly, without warning, was the moment I stopped believing that every trail had a beginning and an end. I used to walk these woods with the kind of confidence that comes from repetition, muscle memory, and daylight. But confidence evaporates fast when the land betrays you, when your own footsteps circle behind your spine, when you hear your breathing echoed from a direction you haven't faced yet. I've been a ranger for more than 12 years, and I thought I'd encountered every kind of fear a person could name. But none of it prepared me for the nights when the ground shifted like an animal stretching, or when the trees seemed to lean in just a fraction too close, their bark whispering a warning I didn't want to understand. My name isn't important, not anymore, not after what's happened, but I've spent most of my adult life working deep in the northern Rockies, in a stretch of land that locals describe with a half joke. The mountains own themselves here. Humans are just visitors. You hear that enough, and it becomes background noise. But the old-timers mean it. Some of them won't hike after dusk. Some of them refuse to camp within a mile of the caves scattered along the ridgelines. And all of them, every last one, have a story they'll share only when they're far from the tree line and the whiskey bottle is nearly empty. I used to think those stories were exaggerations shaped by isolation, shaped by the way the wind can play tricks on a man's ears, shaped by long winters and too much loneliness. But not anymore. Not after the night I walked a straight path and ended up behind myself. I started as a seasonal ranger, then moved to full-time once I realized I didn't want to do anything else. I was 30 back then, lean, strong, hungry to prove myself. My supervisor at the time, an older man named Whitaker, used to tell me I had the right kind of stubbornness to work in forests like these. You gotta respect the land, he'd say, but you can't let it intimidate you. These woods sense weakness, and they test it. I laughed at that. Whitney didn't. He'd spent his career here. The mountains had taken 2 hikers he'd been searching for. He never said it out loud, but I think he blamed himself for the rest of his life. The quiet fear around here isn't the kind that jumps out at you. It's the slow, creeping kind. The kind that sneaks under your skin and stays there. My first real story, the first one where fear became something physical, something that seemed to breathe against my neck, happened 3 years into the job. It was late autumn, the kind where daylight bleeds out fast and dusk feels like a trap closing. I'd been assigned to investigate a report from a group of local hunters who'd found a series of unnerving tracks near the Silvermane Trail. They described them as barefoot human, but wrong, and that phrasing stayed with me. I'd seen countless animal prints, and I knew how heat and melt patterns could distort shapes, but something about the urgency in their voices made me take it seriously. These were men who didn't scare easily. Men who carried rifles that had seen more winters than I had. I hiked out there alone at dawn. The trail was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peace, but anticipation. A low fog drifted through the pines like it was searching for something. The forest was cold enough that my breath felt like it belonged to someone else. Half a mile in, I started noticing claw marks on the lower trunks of the aspens. Not deep, but deliberate. Parallel scratches, evenly spaced, too wide for a cougar and too low to be a bear. I crouched down, running my hand along one of them. The edges were fresh, clean. Whatever made them had been there that morning. I kept moving, slower now, listening for anything out of place. I've learned that the woods always tell you when something is nearby. Birds go quiet, branches hold their breath, even the wind seems to avoid areas it knows better than you do. And sure enough, the farther I walked, the more the sound drained out of the world. I reached the small clearing the hunters had mentioned. The fog pooled there, thick and low like it had weight. And in the center of that clearing were the tracks. Bare feet, yes, but longer than any human foot should be. The toes were too far apart, the arch too deep, and the stride too long, like something tall and heavy had walked through with purpose. The moment I saw them, a cold awareness settled into me. Not fear yet. Fear comes later. This was the first stage of something else. Quiet unease, the kind that whispers, "Pay attention." I radioed in, but interference swallowed half my words. The static was sharp enough to sting my ears, and then the signal cut altogether. That shouldn't have happened. I was in range. I tried again. Nothing. Just the hiss of a connection refusing to hold. Then I heard it, the sound that started everything. A low knock. Slow. Measured. Like knuckles against wood, but not from any direction my ears could comprehend. It wasn't ahead of me. It wasn't behind me. It was everywhere at once, pulsing through the fog like it was coming from the air itself. I froze. Every instinct in me, every cell, every memory, every lesson learned the hard way told me not to move. I'd heard strange echoes in forests before. Sound behaves oddly around trees and rock formations, but this wasn't an echo. This was a message, a pattern, a call. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. I lifted my flashlight even though it was daylight. Something about the fog made the sunlight feel weak, like the forest was dimming the world just to watch me react. And when the beam cut through the haze, I saw something shift between the trees on my left. Not fully, just a shape, tall and wide, stepping out of view before I could focus on it. My heartbeat crawled up into my throat. I told myself it was my imagination. I told myself mist and shadow can play tricks. I told myself anything to maintain the logic I depended on, but denial only works until the evidence stacks too high. The knocking came again, closer this time, and then the smell hit me. A deep, earthy musk, thick enough to fill my lungs. It wasn't rot, but something primal, something old, something that belonged to a creature that knew exactly how long I'd been standing there. I should have backed away. Every ranger knows when to disengage, when to respect the boundary between curiosity and danger. But something kept me there, rooted, a strange combination of dread and fascination. I wanted to see it, whatever it was, because I needed to believe the stories had explanations. Then all at once, the fog shifted, pulled, gathered, and a massive silhouette stepped into view, only 20 yards from me. Tall, maybe 8 feet, broad shoulders, long arms that hung low, and eyes. God, the eyes. They reflected just a hint of amber, like coals behind frost. Human-shaped, but not human. Intelligent, but ancient. Curious, but wary. It didn't growl. It didn't charge. It just stared at me. And I realized I wasn't breathing. Then the knocking sound returned, but it wasn't from the trees. It was from its chest. 3 slow, rhythmic thumps, like it was warning me or testing me or acknowledging me. And with that, the fear finally arrived. Not loud, not chaotic. Just a slow realization that I was standing in front of something my mind wasn't built to understand. It stepped back, then another step. Then it disappeared into the fog like it had never been there at all. I should have run. Instead, I followed, and that was my first mistake. I don't know why I moved toward it. Curiosity is part of the job, but this wasn't curiosity. It was compulsion. Something in the way it retreated felt intentional, like it wanted me to follow, like the distance between us was a thread it was slowly pulling. I stepped into the fog, and the forest swallowed the light behind me. The clearing disappeared. The tracks vanished. Even the air felt heavier, as if the woods were closing in to hide what I had just seen. My boots sank slightly into the damp earth, the mud clinging to my steps with a suction that felt uncomfortably human, like hands pressing down around my feet. I moved slowly, scanning the trees for any sign of movement, but the fog made everything shapeless. Branches became limbs. Shadows became silhouettes. What had been familiar now felt like an entirely different forest, a place I had spent years exploring, suddenly unrecognizable. Part of me whispered to turn back, to let the unknown stay unknown. But another part, the stubborn part, the one that got me through ranger school, the one that made me hike miles alone through black timber at midnight, insisted I needed proof. I needed something solid to hold on to, something to confirm I hadn't hallucinated the entire encounter. I kept walking until I realized the knocking had stopped. Silence in these woods isn't rare, but silence that deep, silence that absolute, means something else is listening. My breath steamed in front of me, and as it drifted away, it disappeared faster than it should have, like the fog was swallowing it whole. I raised my flashlight again, and the beam lit only a few feet ahead before dissolving into white. Then I smelled it again, that musk, earthy and warm, as though the creature had circled around me and was now downwind. I spun. Nothing, no shape, no movement, no tracks. But I felt watched. Not the vague, primal sensation anyone gets when they're alone in the woods. This was direct, pointed, intelligent attention. Something was studying me, waiting to see what decision I'd make. My fingers tightened around the radio. I clicked the button, listened, and heard only static. But beneath the static was a faint warble, like a voice swallowed by interference, a tone, a rhythm, almost like a breath. I tried again. Bass, this is Ranger. Static cut me off. I swallowed hard. If anyone can hear this, I am on Silvermane, near the lower clearing. Something's out here. Something big. The reply was jagged and warped, a distortion of familiar voices. Njur. Behind. Behind. I whipped my head around so fast the flashlight beam stuttered. And for a split second, just a fraction of a breath, I saw a shape retreating behind a cedar trunk. Massive. Upright. Quiet. Too quiet. I took a step back, then another. My pulse drummed hard enough that the sound filled my ears. I knew better than to run. Predators chase movement, but every instinct screamed to leave the way I came. Except I didn't know the way I came. The forest looked wrong. The slope of the land felt off. The arrangement of the trees didn't match the map I kept in my head. I'd walked a straight line, I was sure of it, but the path behind me wasn't straight. It curved. It wound. It bent in directions that didn't make sense. I turned in a slow circle, trying to orient myself, but the fog seemed to shift with me, blocking off landmarks, erasing familiar outlines. I checked my compass. The needle spun once, twice, then settled on a direction I knew couldn't be north. Something wasn't right with the land itself. "All right," I muttered, forcing calm into my voice. "Just slow down, backtrack, find a ridge, regain orientation." I moved cautiously, keeping my boots aligned with the faint impressions I thought were my original steps. The fog thinned a bit, enough that I could make out a line of pines ahead. Relief flickered through me until I reached them. My footprints ended there. No branching, no fading, no disturbance of soil. Just gone, as if I had stepped out of myself. That was the moment doubt crept in, quiet, subtle, but intrusive. Had I been so rattled by the encounter that I'd lost track of where I walked? Had the fog disoriented me more than I realized? The human mind misinterprets the woods all the time. Shadow illusions, echo trickery, wrong turns that feel impossible. But the silence argued otherwise. Branches overhead trembled, not from wind, but from weight. Something moved above me, slow and deliberate. I angled the flashlight upward, and though I saw nothing, the needles rained down softly in a way that made my skin prickle. Large animals don't climb trees like that, and whatever that thing was, it wasn't moving like an animal. It was moving like something that understood how to stay hidden. I pressed on, deeper into the trees, hoping to break out of the fog patch. Gradually, the cloud loosened, drifting upward, thinning into strands like smoke. The forest reemerged, sharp and cold. For a moment, I felt grounded again. Then I saw myself. About 30 feet ahead, standing with one hand on a fallen log as if catching his breath, was a ranger in my uniform, my build, my posture, the same backpack, the same boots, the same everything. My heart lurched so violently I nearly stumbled. I stopped dead where I was, every muscle locking tight. The figure didn't turn around, didn't move at all. It just stood there, shoulders rising and falling with a shaky breath I recognized too well. I raised the flashlight with trembling hands. The figure lifted its head slightly, just enough that I could see the back of its neck, tensed and pale. And then, impossibly, it mirrored me. When I raised the flashlight, it raised its hand, fingers curled around something invisible, as though it held a beam of light I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Something cold slid through my spine, the realization that the forest hadn't just hidden my path, it had duplicated me. "Hey!" I shouted before I could stop myself. The echo bounced weirdly between the trees. The figure stiffened. Slowly, so slowly, it turned, as though its bones resisted the motion. I braced myself. I didn't know what I was expecting. My own face, twisted into something monstrous, a creature wearing my shape like a poorly fitted mask. But when it finally faced me, my stomach dropped. There was no face, just smooth, pale skin where features should have been. No eyes, no mouth, no ridge of a nose, only the faintest indentation of where emotion should live. Yet even without eyes, it looked at me. I knew it. I felt it. Its head tilted, mimicking the way I sometimes assess trail damage. Then it lifted a hand toward me. It didn't beckon. It didn't threaten. It simply pointed. Behind me. I didn't want to turn. Every instinct howled not to. The faceless copy kept pointing, its whole posture trembling like it was warning me, begging me, pleading with me. I turned, and something enormous stepped out from behind a granite outcrop. Tall, broad, shoulders hunched forward like a bear standing upright. But this wasn't a bear. The outline was wrong. The arms hung too long. The posture was too human. A low, resonant breath rattled the needles on the forest floor. My chest constricted. The silhouette stepped closer. Not fast, not aggressive, just steady, relentless, like it had been quietly waiting for me to notice it. I couldn't run. I couldn't fight. All I could do was stand frozen between a creature wearing no face and a creature wearing too much truth. The faceless version of me backed away, shaking its head violently, as if telling me not to engage, not to stand my ground, not to breathe. The creature behind me exhaled again, and the temperature dropped so sharply my breath crystallized. Then the trees shifted, not the wind, the trees. They leaned, not bending, not swaying, leaned as if repositioning themselves around us. The forest was closing in, and I understood, too late, that whatever was happening wasn't about survival. The woods were choosing. The faceless copy vanished into the fog. The creature stepped closer, and somewhere far behind me the knocking began again. The knocking didn't come from the trees anymore. It resonated from the ground itself, like something deep in the earth was beating a slow, heavy rhythm. Each thump traveled up my legs and into my chest, syncing with my pulse until I couldn't tell which heartbeat was mine. The creature behind me exhaled again, a slow, deliberate breath that felt like it carried the weight of ages, and I realized it wasn't closing the distance. Not yet. It was waiting. I had the sickening sense that the woods were staging something, arranging us like pieces in a ritual I hadn't agreed to take part in. I forced myself to back away, careful, controlled, never turning my back to the silhouette. Its outline was clearer now. Fur matted with earth and moss, shoulders like boulders, arms that swayed slightly with each breath, as if gravity pulled at them differently. But the head, God, the head was what made my skin crawl. Elongated, crowned by a subtle slope like something built for listening more than seeing. And its eyes. When it blinked, I felt the temperature drop another degree. It took one step forward and my throat tightened. Then another knock sounded, louder. This time from the ridge to my left. The creature turned its head slightly, considering the sound, watching, judging. And in that hesitation, I ran. Not a sprint, not a blind dash, a ranger's retreat, measured steps, controlled breathing, no noise louder than needed. But the forest wasn't cooperating. Branches grabbed at my sleeves, roots curled like they were rising to trip me. The fog closed in again, thicker now, swirling around my legs like it wanted to hold me in place. I kept moving, memorizing the slope under my boots, counting steps, calculating direction, even as panic clawed at the back of my mind. But the forest had shifted, subtly, impossibly, and nothing aligned with the map in my head. Every tree looked too familiar, and that was worse. The repetition felt intentional. The knocking followed me. Not steady now, not rhythmic, guiding, first ahead, then to the right, then behind me again. It was hurting me. By the time I reached a break in the fog, my lungs burned. I steadied myself on a fallen cedar and forced my breathing to slow. The forest here felt older, the trees thicker, their trunks swollen with age. A stream I didn't recognize cut across the path, its water moving too quietly for its volume. The silence beneath the flow unnerved me. And then I realized where I was. The cave system was close. The locals talk about them like they're the lungs of the mountain, breathing in shadows, exhaling fear. They say the caves connect in ways that defy logic, that people who wander inside don't always come back out the same way. Some don't come out at all. Old stories blame creatures, spirits, even the mountain itself. I always chalked it up to folklore and poor navigation. But seeing that cave mouth now, dark, wide, waiting, sent a chill through me that cut deeper than anything I'd felt earlier. The knocking grew louder, echoing from inside. No, I wasn't going in there. Then I heard movement behind me, heavy, slow. The creature had followed. I turned, and its silhouette emerged through the fog like a nightmare stepping into reality. It didn't rush. It didn't need to. This wasn't a chase to it. It was inevitability. I backed toward the cave without realizing it, my boots scraping stone. No, I whispered, as if the word could rewrite the direction of things. No, not there. But the creature stopped moving. It just stared at me, or through me. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't trying to catch me. It was trying to corner me into the cave, a place where sound twisted, where direction folded, where footsteps could lead backward even when you walked forward. Stories had always said the caves played tricks, but what if the caves weren't the ones playing? What if the creature needed me inside? Another knock came, this time softer, closer, almost right behind me. I whipped around. Standing at the cave's edge, half hidden by shadow, was my faceless copy. It trembled, body jerking like it couldn't control its own movements. Its chest rose and fell with panicked breaths it couldn't exhale. When it stepped forward into the light, I saw its arms, scraped and bruised, as if it had been clawing its way out of something. Its head tilted, just like before, but the motion was frantic now. It was afraid. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to get closer. But something in the way it leaned toward me, pleading, made my feet shift. It wasn't threatening me. It wasn't trying to mimic me. It was warning me. Its hand lifted again, trembling, and it didn't point behind me this time. It pointed directly into the cave. At first, I thought it was telling me not to go in, but then I realized its finger wasn't aiming at the cave entrance. It was pointing at something deeper, something inside. Before I could process the implication, the creature behind me let out a low sound, half breath, half growl. The faceless copy flinched violently and stepped deeper into the cave like it had no choice. "No," I whispered. "Don't." But it kept going. With each step, the knocking changed pitch, deeper, more resonant, until it felt like the cave itself had a heartbeat. And then the faceless copy vanished into the dark. Not gradually, like it was pulled. I stumbled backward, pulse hammering. The creature behind me didn't move. It just watched. And for a terrible moment, I felt something pass between us, an understanding. It wanted me to follow, but not to kill me, to show me something. That made the fear worse. The cave mouth exhaled cold air that smelled of stone, wet earth, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. The darkness inside wasn't absence. It was substance, thick and alive. My flashlight beam skittered across the interior and disappeared as though swallowed. I should have run. I should have taken my chances with the woods, the fog, the creature. Anything but that cave. But something deeper than fear tugged at me. Curiosity mixed with dread, a terrible cocktail that tasted like inevitability. I stepped toward the entrance. The creature exhaled again, as if acknowledging the choice, and then it stepped back into the fog and disappeared, leaving me alone with the knocking that now came from deep within stone. I crossed the threshold. Immediately, the air changed, dense, pressurized like descending underwater. The light behind me faded, swallowed by a curve in the stone. The tunnel walls felt close, as though they leaned inward when I wasn't looking. My footsteps sounded wrong, too loud, too sharp, out of sync with the rhythm echoing from deeper inside. I moved slowly, tracing the passage with my flashlight. The ground dipped subtly. The walls glistened with moisture that smelled faintly sulfuric. Every few feet, I passed claw marks etched deep into the rock, parallel, deliberate, fresh. Some were so wide that my hand couldn't span them. The knocking continued, steady now, purposeful, guiding me deeper. I stopped when I reached a chamber where the ceiling opened into a cathedral of stone. The echoes here were strange, each sound repeating in layers like different versions of the same noise overlapping. And that's when I heard breathing. Not my own, not behind me, above me, slow, heavy, wet. I angled my flashlight up and saw something that made my body go cold from the inside out. Clinging to the ceiling, wedged between stone like an enormous pale spider, was another faceless version of me. Its limbs were wrong, too long, too bent, and its chest convulsed with silent breaths, each one making it shudder as if holding back a scream. It turned its head toward me. Even without eyes, I felt its gaze, and from somewhere deeper in the cave, the knocking changed rhythm. Not a warning, a countdown. The countdown wasn't fast. It wasn't urgent. It was slow, agonizingly slow. Like whatever waited deeper in the cave wanted me to understand that time didn't belong to me anymore. Each knock spread through the cave walls like vibrations in a massive living body. The faceless version of me clinging to the ceiling twitched in response, its limbs adjusting with unnatural angles as if aligning itself to that rhythm. I couldn't look away. I tried. God knows I tried. But there is something paralyzing about seeing your own shape stripped of humanity. The smooth skin where eyes should be, the trembling jawline with no mouth to voice its agony. The fingers stretched a little too long, almost jointless, like they were made for grasping something far softer than stone. It shuddered again, and the movement sent dust trickling down around me. I stepped back involuntarily, boots scraping rock. The sound echoed through the chamber with an unnatural delay, like it had to push its way through thick air before reaching the walls. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, but the cave's heartbeat, the knocking, was louder. That's when I realized something I hadn't noticed before. There weren't just two versions of the knock. There were three, one from deep within the cave, one faint and high above me, and one terrifyingly subtle, coming from somewhere incredibly close. I didn't want to look down. My flashlight trembled in my grip, the beam jittering across the uneven stone floor. There, in the dust, were footprints. Bare, human-shaped but stretched, the toes elongated and digging deep furrows in the dirt. Tiny debris inside the prints told me they were fresh, seconds fresh. The prints led behind a rock pillar. I didn't move. I barely breathed. A soft scraping came from behind the pillar, like flesh dragging against stone. My flashlight beam wavered as it slowly crept around the curve of the rock. Every instinct begged me not to look. I looked anyway, and another version of me stood there. But this one had a face. My face. Except the expression was all wrong. Its eyes were too wide, too bright, too alive. Its smile stretched just a hair too far. And though its breathing was steady, its chest rose with a strange, delayed rhythm, as if copying a breath it wasn't meant to have. When it blinked, the motion wasn't natural. It was a slow shudder, as if the eyelids were learning the sequence for the first time. The copy tilted its head, studying me, mirroring my posture a full second too late. It was like watching a puppet controlled by someone who only vaguely understood how humans worked. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the cave wall. The ceiling creature twitched violently at the sudden sound, its limbs quivering like plucked wires. The knock from deep within the cavern intensified, faster now, more pressing. The copy with my face took a single step toward me. I raised my flashlight sharply. The beam hit its eyes, but instead of flinching, the pupils dilated, greedily swallowing the light as if drinking it. Then, God help me, it spoke. In my voice, but wrong. Like shallow water mimicking deeper waves. You walked the wrong path. My stomach clenched. Hearing my own voice in that warped tone was worse than any monstrous growl could have been. It sent a shiver through my bones, the kind that feels like a warning from inside your DNA. I didn't. My voice broke before the words were fully formed. I didn't walk anywhere wrong. I followed. It stepped closer, the cave knocking, syncing with its movements now. No, you followed what wasn't yours to follow. Behind me, something shifted. Air pressure, maybe, or something deeper. The ground trembled lightly under my boots. I need to leave, I whispered, more to myself than to it. The copy's head tilted again, almost like pity. There is no leaving. There is only choosing. The copy on the ceiling shuddered violently, limbs scraping the stone with high-pitched cracks. Bits of rock showered down. I stumbled to the side, and the copy with my face mirrored the movement, off by a second again, its expression tightening like stretched skin, trying to form a motion it didn't understand. The knocking grew faster. I didn't think. I bolted toward a passage on the right, the narrow tunnel that looked barely wide enough to fit my shoulders. The copy with the face lunged, its movement a blur, far too fast, and its fingers grazed my jacket. The fabric tore like paper. I dove into the tunnel, scraping elbows and knees, the rock biting through layers of cloth and skin. Behind me, the copies screamed, but it wasn't a sound. It was like air being ripped apart. I crawled, pushing deeper until the passage dropped steeply. My hands slid on slick stone, and before I could stop myself, I was sliding down a chute of cold rock, tumbling, spinning, hitting edges that knocked the breath from my lungs. Then, sudden and violent, I dropped. I crashed onto soft earth, pain exploding through my shoulder. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world was darkness and the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. But then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Slow, even, patient. I forced myself upright, gasping, my flashlight flickering. The beam darted across the cavern, larger this time, but warmer somehow, like the walls were closer to flesh than stone. Strange formations clung to the ceiling, but when my light hit them, they curled slightly, shrinking away from the brightness. The breathing stopped. I held my breath, waiting. A low rumble answered from the far end of the chamber. Something moved in the darkness. Massive, deliberate, unhurried. A silhouette stepped into my beam, and for the first time I saw its full form. The creature from the forest. Taller than any man, its fur thick and matted, streaked with dirt and wet moss. Its shoulders rose and fell with slow breaths. Its arms hung long and heavy, fingertips grazing stone. And its face wasn't monstrous. It wasn't human either. It looked old, ancient, worn by centuries of watching, listening, surviving. The eyes reflected amber light, not glowing, but alive. Focused, intelligent. It had followed me. Not because it wanted to kill me, because it needed me here. I staggered to my feet, backing away, hands raised in instinctive surrender. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, voice barely audible. The creature's chest expanded with a long inhalation. It lifted a massive hand and touched the wall beside it. Knock, a single firm knock. Then it pointed to the wall. I stared, not understanding. The creature knocked again, softer this time, and the rock responded. A faint outline appeared, smooth, pale, human-shaped. Another copy, pressed into the stone like a fossil. My breath hitched. Dozens of similar shapes appeared around the chamber as my flashlight swept across. Some faceless, some half-formed, some with too much detail as if trapped mid-scream. The creature watched me absorb the horror. It didn't move, didn't advance, didn't threaten. It just waited. Then it stepped closer and lowered its head until we were eye level. It placed a heavy hand on its own chest. Knock, knock, knock. And suddenly I understood what the sound had been all along. Not a warning, not a countdown, not a threat. A signal, a test. And I had walked straight into it. The creature's hands stayed pressed to its chest, the echoes of those 3 knocks still vibrating faintly through the cavern walls. The sound wasn't loud, but it resonated deeply, through the floor, through my ribs, through something older in me I didn't know how to name. My fear didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It became sharper, quieter, more dangerous. Not panic anymore. Recognition. The creature wasn't telling me what it wanted. It was asking if I understood. I didn't. Not fully. But something in the way the knocking shifted from menacing to deliberate made the message unmistakable. There was meaning here. A pattern. A purpose. The cave wasn't a trap. It was a threshold. And I'd already crossed too far into it to pretend otherwise. The creature stepped back one slow stride, giving me space. Its amber eyes watched every breath I took. Its presence filled the chamber like a second atmosphere, thick, expectant, alive. Then it pointed again. Not at the wall this time. At me. I stiffened. "I'm not." My voice cracked. I swallowed. "I'm not part of this." The creature's head tilted with deliberate patience, as if waiting for the lie to crumble on its own. Behind me, something shifted in the dark, a soft, dragging sound, skin against stone. I spun, flashlight trembling in my hand, and saw the faceless copy from the ceiling. Not clinging now, but crawling down the wall with slow, heaving motions. Its limbs bent wrong, elbows hyperflexed, fingers splayed wide like a spider learning to walk upright. It collapsed near the floor, chest convulsing, breaths rattling like a trapped animal. My instinct was to back away, but something stopped me, and it wasn't bravery. It was the raw, unmistakable realization that the copy wasn't approaching to harm me. It was dying, not like a creature, like a reflection losing coherence. Its body shuddered with each breath, limbs spasming as if pulled by strings from different directions. The skin along its ribs thinned, translucent enough to reveal bone-like shadows underneath. It reached one trembling hand toward me, not aggressively but pleadingly. Then its hand jerked back, twisting into a convulsion. Its limbs curled inward. Its smooth face caved slightly, the skin collapsing without bone structure beneath to hold it. It made no sound, but the silence of its suffering felt worse than any scream. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered. The creature watched us both, unblinking. A faint vibration traveled through the ground. Another knock, too soft to echo, but strong enough that dust sifted from above, and suddenly I realized the truth. The faceless copies weren't threats. They were rejects, failed versions, attempts. The creature wasn't hunting humans, it was testing them. My stomach twisted. "No," I said softly, backing away from both of them. "No, I'm not part of this. I'm not." My words cut off when the cave went utterly, impossibly still. The creature straightened slowly, and the shift in its posture was unmistakable. Whatever patience it had allowed me up until now was gone. Something beyond this chamber was awakening. A deep, resonant knock thundered through the cavern, one louder than anything before, a seismic pulse that rattled stone and bone alike. The faceless copy on the floor spasmed violently, then went still, skin sagging into a formless heap. The other fossil-like impressions along the walls throbbed faintly as though sensing something stirring. The creature took a step toward me. Unlike before, this movement wasn't gentle. It wasn't curious. It was decisive. My flashlight flickered, once, twice, and then steadied. The beam caught the creature's eyes, and the reflection was different now. Not just amber, not just alive, purposeful. It raised one massive finger and pointed toward a narrow passage at the far side of the chamber, a tunnel I hadn't noticed until now. The entrance pulsed faintly with the same rhythm as the knocking. "I'm not going deeper," I whispered, voice shaking. "You can kill me here if you have to, but I'm not going deeper." The creature stared. Then it did something I didn't expect. It stepped aside, completely aside. It wasn't ushering me deeper. It was letting me choose. Behind the creature, the tunnel beckoned deeper into the mountain, dark, breathing, ancient. But behind me was the chute I'd fallen through. A vertical drop, no handholds, no way to climb back up without gear, without help. A trap both ways. Except one led further into whatever ritual the creature orchestrated, and the other led nowhere at all. The creature waited, patient, immobile. The cave had become a crossroads, and I had to choose. My breath quickened, my mind raced. I wasn't religious, but I found myself praying, not for survival, but for clarity, for reason, for a single moment of understanding in a place where logic was crumbling. The creature tapped its chest again, knock, 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 a steady, neutral rhythm. Then it touched the wall of the deeper tunnel, not pointing, naming. My flashlight beam shook, sweat chilled on my skin. The air tasted metallic again, heavy with the scent of stone and something older, something almost alive. I stepped backward. The creature watched. My boot hit something soft. I glanced down and saw the collapsed, faceless copy. Its hand, limp, unmoving, pointed not at the creature, not at the deeper tunnel, but at the chute I'd fallen through. Reaching upward, as if it had tried to climb before it died, as if it had been trying to escape. My lungs tightened. This thing, this copy, hadn't been hunting me earlier. It had been running for its life, and the creature had cornered it just like it had cornered me. My voice cracked. "What are you doing to us?" My question was swallowed by the cavern, but I didn't need an answer. The wall answered for me. Behind the creature, the fossil-like impressions began to pulse. Softly at first, then brighter, some shapes clearer, some less. A grotesque gallery of attempts. Not trophies. Attempts at life, attempts at copying, attempts at replacing. So close, but not perfect. I closed my eyes, bile rising in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm not part of this." When I opened my eyes again, the creature was still watching me, still waiting. The knocking grew louder, coming from somewhere deeper, closer, approaching. No time, no choice. Just a single truth. If I stayed in the chamber, something far worse than the creature would arrive. Something the creature itself feared. The deeper tunnel throbbed with its coming. My chest tightened painfully. My vision blurred around the edges. I turned, not toward the deeper tunnel, not toward the creature, but toward the chute. The vertical shaft I had fallen through, impossible to climb. Unless I made it possible. I grabbed the nearest jut of rock and pulled myself upward with a desperation that burned through muscle and terror alike. My boots scraped the wall, slipping. I lunged, grabbed another hold, hauled myself again. The stone gouged my fingers, peeled skin from knuckles, tore fabric, but I didn't stop. Below me, The creature didn't follow, but it didn't leave either. It watched, and from behind it, deeper in the cavern, something vast inhaled. The air pressure changed. Dust rained down, the walls quivered, whatever lived deeper in the mountain was waking. My arms burned, my lungs screamed, my fingers bled, but I climbed. Another foothold, another pull, another desperate scramble upward. Behind me, the knocking became thunder, not in rhythm, but in hunger. I climbed until the light of my flashlight dimmed below and the cave's breath no longer brushed my neck. And when I pulled myself over the top edge, trembling, gasping, half delirious, the fog of the forest greeted me. Cold, silent, waiting. And the first thing I saw was my own footprints in the dirt, leading away, but every single one pointed toward me. Every print, every toe mark, every heel strike angled inward, converging on the exact spot where I had just climbed out of the earth. It was as if the ground had recorded the moment of my arrival before I'd even escaped. Fresh, sharp, edges crisp as if stamped only seconds earlier. My stomach folded in on itself. The forest didn't greet me. It recognized me. The fog was denser up here than when I'd first fallen, thick enough that the nearest trees looked like silhouettes drawn in charcoal, smudged and fading at the edges. The air felt colder, too, damp enough that each breath stuck to the inside of my throat like wet cotton. And beneath the usual scents of pine and soil was something I had never encountered above ground in all my years as a ranger. The metallic tang of cave air. It had followed me. The knocking, that awful hollow rhythm, had stopped the moment I climbed out. But the silence that replaced it was worse. Like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for me to realize something. Waiting for me to understand. I stumbled forward, away from the chute, boots crunching over my own overlapping footprints. The fog parted in thin, hesitant ribbons, revealing more tracks, mine. Circling trees, doubling back, weaving like someone had wandered drunk or delirious. Except I hadn't done this. I hadn't walked this trail today, or ever. Each footprint was mine, but not my steps. Something colder slid down my spine than any draft of fog could cause. I kneeled, running my fingers along the nearest print. The soil was still soft, disturbed, the imprint fresh, maybe minutes old, maybe less. I swallowed, staring at the heel curve, the weight distribution, the stride pattern. Predator tracking, trained, methodical, just like I'd walked the forest 1,000 times before, except this wasn't tracking anything. It was positioning, circling, encircling. Something had walked in patterns around the chute as if guarding it or waiting for me to come out. And that something walked like me. The cave had shown me one attempt, a broken copy, a failed imitation, but the footprints here, these belonged to a version that hadn't failed. A version that could pass, a version the forest wouldn't question. My pulse thrashed against my ribs. Something moved in the fog, a soft rustle, a shifting of pine needles. I rose slowly, instinct dragging every motion like I was underwater. The fog thickened again, swallowing the trees one by one until the world was nothing but white, dark trunks, and the quiet terror of not being alone. My voice came out thin. "Who's there?" The trees didn't echo the question. The fog answered instead by holding perfectly still. Too still. No breeze, no birds, no distant creak, no insects, just the thick, pressing quiet of a forest coerced into silence. Then, a single pine cone snapped on the ground behind me. I turned so fast the world blurred. My hand shot to my belt, gripping my sheathed knife. My flashlight sliced through the fog in a trembling arc, landing on nothing. Nothing except more of my own footprints. But this set was different. The spacing, the depth, the direction. These pointed away from me, meaning whoever or whatever made them had been facing me, watching me, close. Not long ago, I stepped backward and the fog seemed to follow, the air tightening around my throat. My instincts screamed to move, to run, to get out, but my training forced my legs to stay anchored. Don't run. Don't give a predator your back. Don't show fear unless you want to feed something with it. A shape flickered in the fog ahead. Faint, human height, human stillness. My breath stalled in my lungs. The silhouette didn't move. Neither did I. Then it took a single step toward me, a heavy, deliberate step. A step I knew, a step that carried the same rhythm as my own gait. I raised the flashlight higher. Stop right there. The shape froze. And this was somehow worse. I swallowed hard. Identify yourself. No answer. The fog swirled gently around the figure's edges. The silence grew thicker by pressing against my ears until they ached. I forced myself to take one step closer, the ground crunching beneath my weight. The figure mirrored me. Not perfectly, but close enough that my legs threatened to give way. I steadied my breath. I'm armed, I warned. Don't make me. The silhouette took another step. I yanked my knife free. The moment the blade left its sheath, the forest reacted. Not the figure. The forest. A tremor of wind, sudden and cold, pushed through the trees like a warning passing invisibly from trunk to trunk. The figure stopped, tilted its head, and then it knocked on a nearby tree. Once, twice, 3 times. My entire body went cold. No. That rhythm, that message, that language. The same as the creature. The same as the cave. The same as the moment everything shifted from strange to nightmare. The figure knocked again, slower, more deliberate, as if testing whether I recognized it. The tree didn't echo the sound, but the ground did. A faint vibration hummed under my boots, pulsing outward in concentric ripples. A summoning, a warning, a greeting. I didn't wait to find out which. I lunged toward the nearest tree, placing it between me and the fog shape. My breath tore through my chest. I peered around the trunk. Gone. The silhouette vanished as if the fog swallowed it whole, but the footprints remained, and they angled directly toward me again. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a root. My flashlight darted across the ground. The prints were multiplying, branching off in 2, 3, 5 directions, each path weaving closer, encircling, closing in. This wasn't tracking. This was corralling. Something wanted me moving, and it wanted me moving now. I turned and ran. I've never been the panicked run type. Rangers don't survive this long by sprinting blindly into the woods, but instinct overruled training. Every hair on my body stood on end as if the forest itself was charging after me, fog twisting around my arms like fingers trying to drag me back toward the buried thing beneath the earth. Branches slapped my face. Needles tore my sleeves. Mud sucked at my boots. I ran until my lungs burned and my vision blurred with tears I didn't remember shedding. Something followed. Not footsteps, but presence. A weight behind me. Not a creature. Not a man. A shape that matched my stride perfectly. Breathing when I breathed, stopping when I stumbled. Then, to my left. Close. Too close. Another me. A silhouette with my posture, my height, my stride. Running parallel, my throat closed, I veered right. Another shape followed. A third shadow, barely visible but undeniably real, darted through the trees behind me. My flashlight beam jittered wildly, catching glimpses, an arm, a shoulder, the back of a head, all matching mine. Copies, multiple, alive. Aware, hunting, or driving me toward something. The forest thinned suddenly. A clearing opened like a wound in the fog, ringed with pines leaning inward as though listening. I stumbled into the open and skidded to a halt. The footprints stopped here, all of them. Every track, mine or not mine, converged into a single tight circle in the center of the clearing. The ground inside the circle was bare, smooth, undisturbed, but the fog above it, slowly, deliberately, as if stirred by something standing inside the ring, invisible, waiting. My breathing went shallow. A realization slid into me like a knife. The cave wasn't hunting me. It was releasing something into the forest, and it wanted me to see it, or become it. My fingers trembled around the flashlight. My knife felt suddenly small, primitive, pointless. I took one step back, and the fog whispered, no sound, no words, just the pressure of something exhaling. Directly behind me, I froze, muscles locking, the cold breath tightening around my skull. This time I didn't turn. I couldn't, because before I even saw it, I knew. Whatever stood behind me now wasn't trying to copy me anymore. It already had. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I didn't even let my eyes fully shift toward the shape behind me. Every instinct, every primal ancient warning in my bones told me that if I turned too fast or too slowly or too deliberately, something would break. Something inside me, something between us. The clearing pulsed. The The fog rippled with a faint inward pull as though gravity had changed direction. My heartbeat thrashed against my throat. I could feel it, behind me. A presence with the same height, same weight distribution, same breath. But wrong. Not flawed like the faceless copy. Not sloppy like the shadows that had chased me through the trees. Not experimental. This one had finished becoming. And I felt, deeply, without needing to see it, that it was studying me the same way I might study an injured animal. Assessing fragility, predicting reaction, searching for the exact moment when it would need to decide between mercy and instinct. My knees weakened. Sweat chilled down my spine. Slowly, cautiously, I lowered my flashlight. I didn't want the beam swinging too wide, illuminating something I wasn't ready to face. Not yet. The air behind my neck trembled with the faint warmth of breath. My breath. The shape inhaled when I inhaled, held its breath when mine hitched, an echo with perfect timing, too perfect. I swallowed hard. What are you? The forest didn't answer, but the shape did. Not with words, not with movement, with a sound. A low, soft knock on the back of a tree directly behind me, once, twice, 3 times. But these weren't the hollow cavern knocks. These sounded denser, quieter, as if bone tapped gently enough that the forest wouldn't hear. But I would. A private signal. A private conversation. My voice shook. Stop. It didn't. A 4th knock, slower. A 5th. Then another rhythm, farther away, to my left, and another, to my right. Shapes I couldn't see answered the first one in the fog, communicating, coordinating, closing in. I took 1 step forward toward the center of the clearing, the only place where the footprints had refused to tread. The air was warmer there, the fog thinner, and it felt like stepping into a pocket pulled out of time. Everything beyond the circle dimmed as if witnessed from underwater. Behind me, a branch snapped. I turned, slowly, carefully, and finally saw it. Me, but not me. A figure stepped out of the fog with the exact tilt of my head, the exact length of my stride, the same boots I wore, the same jacket, the same small scar along my chin from when a branch hit me years ago. Only the eyes were wrong, not glowing, not monstrous, just empty. Like someone had painted my face perfectly but forgotten to give it weight. Understanding. Soul. Seeing it wasn't like looking in a mirror. It was like looking at a memory someone else was puppeteering. My hand tightened around my knife, though I knew it wouldn't matter. My voice felt far away. Why are you doing this? The copy didn't blink. It didn't tilt its head or breathe in any unnatural way. It just stood there. Body perfectly relaxed, perfectly natural, except for the eyes. Hollow, watching, waiting. Shapes shifted behind it. 2 more silhouettes emerged, then another, all identical. Not clones, reflections, each one mirroring a different version of me. Posture from last week, clothes from last month, hair length from last year, a fractured timeline built from echoes that shouldn't exist. My throat burned with panic. No, this isn't real. One of the copies stepped closer, not aggressively, but with a heartbreaking familiarity, like watching myself take a step in a memory I'd forgotten. Every version moved differently. One carried the same tension I had during my first year as a ranger. Another walked with the tired heaviness I had during the wildfire season. Another had the long stride from when my confidence was at its peak. They weren't random imitations. They were iterations, experiments, attempts at understanding me by assembling pieces of who I had been. And the newest one, the closest one, was the most accurate, the most complete. Soon, maybe too soon, one of these versions would be completely indistinguishable from me. And then what? Would it replace me? Would it return to the station and live my life until no one could tell the difference? Would I be absorbed back into the cave, into the earth, into the shadowy fossil wall of failures? Or would the cave take something deeper than my life? My identity? My reason? Myself? The closest copy raised a hand, my hand, and held it out, palm facing me. I stepped back. The fog swirled, tightening the clearing into a shrinking arena. The trees leaned inward, creaking. The forest wasn't resisting this thing. It was allowing it, as if recognizing the copies as part of its natural order. The closest version of me spoke. It used my voice, but stripped of everything that made it mine. You walked the wrong path. My heart stopped cold. It wasn't just imitating my body, it was imitating my memory. No, I whispered. No, I didn't. You walked behind yourself, it said again. You went where you weren't meant to go. My hand twitched around the knife. That cave. Nobody knew it was there. The copy's head tilted, soft as a lullaby. It wasn't meant for you. Behind it, two more stepped closer. Not hostile, just present, inescapably present. You went too deep, the main one said. You saw what you shouldn't have seen. My breath fractured. I wasn't trying to. It doesn't matter what you tried. Its voice hit me like a strike to the chest, not loud, not vicious, just true. The mountain remembers, it murmured. Goosebumps stabbed up my arms, my lungs trembled. And now, it said quietly, so do we. The copies moved in a slow, synchronized half-circle, enclosing me without ever making a sound. Their steps didn't disturb the soil, their eyes didn't blink, their bodies didn't twitch. They were perfect. Too perfect. The one closest to me reached into its pocket, my pocket, and pulled out something small, round, shiny. I knew what it was before it opened its hand. My ranger badge. I touched my chest. The spot where it should have been. Gone. My badge had been taken, not just copied, taken. The copy held it lightly, almost respectfully. You don't need this anymore, it said softly. Fear flattened every thought in my head. Every instinct to run or fight dissolved into a raw, primal refusal. This is not you. This is not you. This is not you. The copy stepped closer, just inches away now. I raised my knife, hands shaking violently. It didn't flinch, didn't even look at the blade. You're gonna sleep now, it said, not as a threat, but as a fact. We'll walk the paths for you. The forest hushed. The fog stopped moving. My pulse roared in my ears. I choked. I'm not letting you take my place. The copy's empty eyes flickered with something almost human. Not emotion, recognition. You already did. My legs nearly buckled, because deep down, in a place beneath thought and breath and fear, I knew what it meant. When I climbed out of that cave, something else came out too. Not behind me, not after me, as me. The circle of footprints, the versions of myself in the fog, the missing badge, the perfect mimic standing inches away. The realization hit like a collapse of earth under my feet. One of these wasn't a copy anymore. One of these had become the true version. And maybe I was the extra one. The copy reached for me, and the forest exhaled. The forest's long exhale wasn't wind. It wasn't weather. It was the sound of something old settling into place, like a door closing softly on the other side of the world. My pulse hammered. My lungs squeezed. The knife shook in my grip as if trying to leap out of my hand. The copy's fingers brushed my sleeve. My movement, my posture, my warmth mirrored so perfectly it felt like touching glass that remembered being human. I jerked back, stumbling into the bare circle of untouched soil at the clearing center. The moment my boot crossed that line, something changed. The fog around me shuddered, like a muscle contracting. The circle pulsed once with a dull, almost inaudible thump beneath my feet, like a heartbeat trapped under the earth. The copies stopped. All of them. Every version froze mid-step, mid-breath, mid-intrusion. Even the newest one, the perfect one, stood as still as the trunk of the nearest pine. The forest held its breath again, and I felt the air shift with a strange certainty. Whatever this place was, it belonged to something deeper than them. And it had boundaries. I steadied myself, breath trembling. Stay back. The copies didn't react, not a twitch, not a tilt of the head, not a single muscle acknowledging the warning. That was somehow worse. They weren't choosing to stop. They had been stopped by the circle, by this place, by the same force that had carved the fossilized bodies deep inside the cave. My mind spun with the realization that chamber, that gallery of failed attempts, none of those bodies had ever left their places. They had all been trapped in fixed positions, frozen mid-reach, mid-scream, mid-crawl, just like the copies now. My voice scraped out of my throat. What is this? No answer. But the ground beneath me vibrated again, a slow, immense pulse, like something breathing under several feet of soil. My flashlight flickered. The fog recoiled from the circle's edge like mist pulled back by heat, and then a knock. Not from the trees. Not from the copies, not from the cave, from below. One heavy, ancient knock that quaked through my bones. Once, twice, 3 times, the copies straightened. Their empty eyes widened just enough to show fear. For the first time, they looked less like predators and more like prey, suddenly remembering they were not the apex after all. Another tremor rippled outward. Then another. The knocks became rhythmic, deliberate, a language spoken through stone, through earth, through memory. Something beneath the clearing was answering the thing in the cave or commanding it, and I was standing on its voice. The perfect copy stepped forward, barely able to resist the boundary of the circle. Its body twitched like muscles pulled by invisible strings. Its voice came out strained, struggling against something stronger than itself. "You need to leave," it whispered. I blinked. "What?" Its eyes flicked toward the ground. "You can't stay here." The ground pulsed again, stronger, sharper. The circle's soil seemed to tighten like a lung inhaling with force. Tap. My knees wobbled under me. A deep, resonant hum rose from below, vibrating my teeth. And in that hum, something whispered. Not in English, not any language I knew. It was the sensation of being remembered by something older than meaning itself. I staggered back. What is this place? The copy's jaw clenched. A vein bulged in its temple. My temple, but wrong. Too defined. Too perfect. It lifted my badge again, holding it by the edge like an offering. This is where the mountain keeps what it wants. My breath caught. You mean people? The copy didn't answer. Rangers? Still no answer. Me? Its hollow eyes softened, not in empathy, but in recognition. You walked behind yourself, it murmured. You walked the path in the wrong direction, and now it's trying to decide what version stays. The pulse beneath me deepened. The ground shook softly. The fog at the clearing's edges drew inward, tightening into a ring that felt like a throat closing. The mountain wasn't choosing. It was waiting to see how I would react, waiting to see which version of me was more believable, more complete, more true. My fingers slackened around the knife. My breath broke in shallow bursts. My mind ran backwards through the night, through the cave, the creature, the tunnel, the fossilized bodies, the dying copy, the footprints pointing inward. All of it wasn't random. It wasn't a series of encounters. It wasn't a nightmare unfolding. It was a test. Every ranger knows that the forest tests you, the weather tests you, the terrain tests you. But this was different. This was something beneath the forest testing what it allowed to walk its surface. The perfect copy stepped closer to the boundary of the circle, still unable to cross it. Its voice lowered to a tremor. You can't stay here. It's choosing. And the longer you stand in that circle, the more it remembers you. My throat tightened. Why shouldn't it remember me? It blinked, one slow, unnatural blink. Because the mountain doesn't remember people. It swallowed hard. It collects them. The ground convulsed sharply, strong enough to nearly knock me down. A crack split the soil near my boot, small but widening, and from that crack, white, porous, calcified, bone. Not a full skeleton, just a piece. A section of a human rib, fossilized in the same way I'd seen in the cave walls. The copies recoiled in synchronized motion, expressions tightening. The perfect one took another step back. My heart stuttered. This circle wasn't a safe zone. It was a grave. A shallow one. A pit of memories the mountain had kept for centuries. The ground pulsed again, and the bones shifted upward, gently like a hand pressing from below. No, I whispered, stumbling backward. No, 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 you need to run, the copy said sharply. I can't run, I snapped, voice cracking. Not like this, not when all of you are still out here. We won't follow you. I froze. The perfect copy's voice was calmer now, less strained, almost peaceful. The mountain will follow you, it said, not us. That hit me harder than anything else that night. What does it want with me? The copy's expression tightened. To finish. My chest caved inward with panic. Finish what? You. The ground exploded upward. Dust, dirt, broken roots spraying outward. The bone thrust higher, followed by another beside it, forming a line. Then a third. Then a fourth. A human spine was forming itself upward from the earth like a grotesque plant sprouting in fast motion. And the copies, all of them, backed away, every single one. The perfect one met my eyes one last time. "You need to choose your direction," it said. "Forward or back, but choose now." My breath erupted into uncontrolled gasps. Forward or back? What does that mean? It didn't answer. The fog behind it surged like a wave collapsing. The ground beneath me trembled again, violently. The spine cracked loose from the soil with a sound like ice fracturing, and something beneath it inhaled. I ran. I bolted from the circle, knife slipping from my fingers, flashlight swinging wildly. The copies didn't chase me. They stepped aside, watching silently with hollow faces, as if witnessing a ritual reach its climax. The forest trees blurred past me. The fog stretched thin, whipped backward by the speed of my sprint. The knocking beneath the earth faded, replaced by the pounding of my own heart. I didn't look behind me. I didn't want to know what was rising from that grave. I didn't want to know whether it looked like me. I ran until the fog thinned into the ordinary night air, until the trees regained their natural shapes, until my knees buckled and I collapsed on the trail where sunlight would touch in the morning. Only then did I dare look back. Nothing followed. No copies. No shadows. No footsteps. But the mountain watched. The stillness told me that much. And as I lay there on the cold ground, gasping, shaking, gripping the earth just to convince myself it was still real, one truth sank into me like a slow, irreversible frost. In the cave, something had tried to become me. In the forest, something had walked as me. In the clearing, something had decided I didn't belong there. And now I walk the trails with new eyes. I measure every footprint twice, listen to every echo 3 times. And every time I stop to catch my breath, I feel the mountain breathing under my boots. Not hunting, not threatening, just remembering. Because deep in the Rockies where caves breathe and the forest reorganizes itself like a living labyrinth, there's a truth no ranger handbook prepares you for. Sometimes you don't get to choose what version of you the mountain keeps. Sometimes you come out whole. Sometimes you come out changed. And sometimes you come out and find your own footprints waiting for you, pointing the wrong direction, pointing home. And you follow them anyway. Because even when the night is deepest and the forest presses close enough to feel like a living thing whispering at your back, you keep walking, you keep moving, you keep choosing the direction you believe is yours, even when the mountain disagrees. And if one night long from now I hear 3 soft knocks behind me on an empty trail, I'll know the truth. I wasn't the ranger who escaped the mountain. I was the ranger it let borrow his life a little longer. And I'll keep walking just the same, because the forest tests everyone, but only the mountain keeps score.